Hey there, tonight we're uncovering how Native Americans survived harsh winters. What you're about to discover is a blend of ingenious ingenuity and surprising resourcefulness that defies the Hollywood version of cozy log cabins. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights, or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing knee-deep in snow, shivering against the biting wind that feels like it's trying to peel your skin off. Welcome to winter on the Great Plains, where the only thing more relentless than the weather is the drive to survive it. Forget any romantic notions of noble savages serenely communing with nature. Here, it's all about grit, ingenuity, and a serious knack for resource management. First up, the Great Plains. This isn't your backyard snow day. We're talking about an expanse so vast it makes your head spin. Over 500,000 square miles of rolling hills and flatlands, stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. In winter, the temperature can plummet below zero, and the wind howls like it's got something to prove. You might think this place is the last word in desolation, but for the native tribes like the Lakota and Comanche, it was home. And not just home, an absolute masterclass in survival. Now you can't just chuck a few blankets over your head and hope for the best. No, sir. The key here was mobility. Teepees, those iconic conical tents, weren't just for show. They were the ultimate portable homes made from bison hides stretched over wooden poles. Think about it. A dozen hides for a sturdy teepee, give or take, depending on the size. These structures were designed to be broken down and transported at a moment's notice, like Mother Nature's own IKEA flat-pack furniture. The genius part, they were lined with fur for insulation, keeping them cozy enough to stave off frostbite. Speaking of bison, these big guys were more than just a walking meat department. They were the Swiss Army knife of the Plains tribe's winter survival strategy. When the going got tough, the tough made pemmican. If you've never heard of it, pemmican is like the world's first energy bar, minus the fancy packaging. Ground bison meat mixed with fat and berries, it was nutrient-dense, long-lasting, and compact. Perfect for those times when the only thing colder than your toes was the prospect of an empty stomach. Further east, in the dense forests of the northeast, tribes like the Iroquois faced a different kind of challenge. Here, the trees were so thick you could barely see the sky, and the snow piled up like it was trying to swallow the earth whole. But these folks were nothing if not resourceful. Longhouses, their communal dwellings, could stretch over 200 feet in length and were built to withstand the elements. Layers of bark provided insulation, while the central fire kept things toasty. It's like the original open-plan living, complete with smoke-filled air and the occasional draft. Let's bust a few myths while we're at it. The notion that Native Americans lived some sort of primitive, untouched existence is a load of hooey. These were sophisticated societies with complex survival strategies. Take food storage, for instance. The Iroquois practiced agriculture, growing the Three Sisters crops, corn, beans, and squash. These staples were dried and stored in bark containers to last through the winter months, ensuring no one went hungry when the snow buried the fields. They even had designated food storage buildings. Think of them as pre-colonial pantries. But it wasn't just about having enough to eat. It was about maintaining balance with nature, a harmony born not out of some mystical connection, but from sheer necessity. Overhunting or depleting resources wasn't an option. If you did that, you'd be riding your own winter orbit. So, the tribes practiced careful hunting and fishing, following the seasons and migrations. They knew every inch of their territory, like a living map etched into their minds. And let's not forget the social and political angles. Winter was a time for storytelling, for strengthening community bonds, for diplomacy. When you're stuck indoors with a bunch of relatives and neighbors, you better have your negotiation skills sharp. Alliances were forged, disputes settled, and decisions made about future hunts and migrations. It was like a never-ending conference with the occasional snowball fight thrown in for good measure. So, while you're basking in the glow of your central heating, spare a thought for these masters of adaptation who turned survival into an art form. They didn't just endure winter, they thrived in it, with strategies as varied as the landscapes they called home. As we delve deeper into their world, remember, there's more to survival than just keeping warm. It's about using every resource at your disposal, and maybe, just maybe, outsmarting the cold itself. So, while you're basking in the glow of your central heating, spare a thought for these masters of adaptation who turned survival into an art form. They didn't just endure winter, they thrived in it, with strategies as varied as the landscapes they called home. As we delve deeper into their world, remember, there's more to survival than just keeping warm. It's about using every resource at your disposal, and maybe, just maybe, outsmarting the cold itself. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of these architectural marvels that were more than just a roof over the head. We're talking about structures that made even the most pretentious modern design magazines look like amateur hour. First up, let's take a stroll into the longhouses of the Iroquois, true masterpieces of communal living. These weren't just buildings, they were thriving social ecosystems. Picture this, a longhouse stretching up to 200 feet, made from towering tree trunks and covered with bark. Forget about your cramped studio apartment. This was open-plan living before it was cool. The Iroquois longhouse was a communal dwelling where multiple families lived under one roof. Each family had its own designated area, but the central fire was communal, serving as the heart of the home, both literally and socially. You didn't just warm your hands there, you warmed your spirit. Stories were shared, plans were hatched, and the occasional scandal probably brewed over roasted corn. The longhouse was more than shelter. It was the nerve center of Iroquois society, a place where decisions that shaped the community were made. And let's not gloss over the practical genius here. The design of these longhouses was an architectural balancing act between resilience and resourcefulness. Made from readily available materials like wood and bark, they were sustainable before sustainability was even a word. The bark that covered these structures acted as natural insulation, keeping the interior warm during the harsh winters. And when the wind howled like an angry ghost, the sturdy construction held firm. The Iroquois didn't just build to survive, they built to thrive. And speaking of thriving, let's hop over to the Great Plains, where the earth was as flat as a pancake and just as unforgiving. Here, the plains tribes like the Lakota and Comanche had their own architectural ace up their sleeves, the teepee. These conical tents were the epitome of efficiency, the Swiss Army knife of mobile living. Constructed from a wooden frame covered with bison hides, these shelters were designed for quick assembly and disassembly. Imagine a house you could pack up and move in a couple of hours. That's flexibility that would make even the most seasoned roadie weep with envy. But the teepee was more than just a portable home. It was an insulated haven in a landscape where the wind could cut through you like a knife. The bison hides, lined with fur, provided superior insulation, trapping warmth and keeping the cold at bay. And let's not forget the economic aspect. Bison were the lifeblood of the plains tribes, providing food, clothing, and shelter. They were the original one-stop shop, and using their hides to construct teepees was an exercise in resourcefulness that would put modern recyclers to shame. Both the longhouses and teepees were more than just shelters. They were hubs of social interaction, places where the community came together during the long winter months. These structures were the backdrop for storytelling, decision-making, and social bonding. In the absence of Netflix and social media, these gatherings were the entertainment of the day, complete with drama, humor, and the occasional plot twist. Now, let's debunk a myth or two while we're here. The romantic notion that these structures were the product of some mystical connection with nature is a bit of a fairy tale. Sure, there was respect for the environment, but it was born out of necessity, not some idyllic vision of harmony. The reality was much grittier. These architectural designs were the result of centuries of adaptation and innovation, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of adversity. It was about survival, plain and simple, and the Native Americans were masters of it. So, as you sip your hot cocoa and thank your lucky stars for central heating, take a moment to appreciate these architectural wonders. They were more than just shelters. They were the heart of the community, the center of life during the harshest months. They were a testament to the resourcefulness and resilience of the Native American tribes, a reminder that survival is as much about the mind as it is about the body. And as we continue to explore the rich tapestry of Native American life, keep in mind that these stories are more than just tales of survival. They are lessons in adaptability, ingenuity, and the power of community. Because when the snow falls and the wind howls, it's not just about staying warm. It's about finding warmth in each other. Now that we've warmed ourselves by the communal fire, let's dive into the heart of what made these societies tick during those bone-chilling winters. Spoiler alert. It wasn't the lone hunter braving the elements with a wolfish grin and nothing but a spear. Nope, that's just Hollywood trying to sell you a ticket. The real story. It's all about teamwork, baby, an all-hands-on-deck situation where everyone knew their role, and the stakes were as high as a snowdrift in February. First off, let's bust this myth of the solitary hero. The romantic image of a lone warrior, cloak billowing in the icy wind as he single-handedly provides for his people, is a narrative that doesn't hold water, especially frozen water. The truth is, survival was a community effort like a potluck dinner where everyone's dish was essential. In these Native American societies, communal living and resource sharing weren't just nice ideas, they were lifelines. Take the Iroquois, for example. This wasn't just a group of people living near each other. It was a confederacy, a league of 5, and later 6 nations working in concert. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, to use their proper name, was organized like a well-oiled machine. Each nation had its own responsibilities, and resource distribution was a coordinated affair. Forget about every man for himself. It was more like everyone for the common good. You think a lone hunter could provide enough food to sustain an entire longhouse through the winter? That's a snowball's chance in hell. Moreover, those tribal councils were the original board meetings, minus the PowerPoint presentations and overpriced coffee. Decisions about hunting, resource allocation, and even when to pack up and move the whole shebang were made collectively. Leaders weren't sitting on high thrones barking orders. They were chosen for their wisdom and leadership skills. And here's a fun fact. The Iroquois Confederacy had a system of checks and balances that would make even the most seasoned political scientist sit up and take notice. In fact, this system inspired some of the democratic principles found in the U.S. Constitution, who says history doesn't have a sense of irony. Meanwhile, out on the Great Plains, the idea of the lone hunter was just as laughable. The Plains tribes like the Lakota and Comanche relied heavily on communal hunts, especially in winter when resources were scarcer than a warm day in January. These hunts were meticulously planned, executed with the precision of a military operation. They drive bison herds over cliffs or into carefully constructed corrals, ensuring that the kill was efficient and nothing went to waste. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. Every part of the bison was used: meat, bones, hides, sinew, making it the ultimate zero-waste scenario long before that became trendy. Let's not forget the role of tribal councils and leaders here either. These weren't autocrats ruling with an iron fist. They were facilitators, mediators, and when necessary, disciplinarians. They made decisions about when to move to new territories, how to distribute food stores, and occasionally, who got the last slice of dried bison. Joking aside, these were serious responsibilities. A bad decision could mean the difference between feasting and famine, and these leaders were picked based on merit, not just because they had the loudest voice or the shiniest spear. Wisdom, experience, and respect from the community were the tickets to leadership. And in times of crisis, their role was crucial. Imagine trying to negotiate peace between 2 rival groups when one of them just stole the other's winter food supply. That's diplomacy on a knife edge, my friends. Now, let's zoom out a bit for the economic context. This wasn't just about surviving the winter. It was about thriving through it to ensure the community's survival for generations. The Iroquois, for instance, had sophisticated agricultural techniques that were the envy of any green thumb. The 3 Sisters planting method, corn, beans, and squash grown together, was a stroke of genius that maximized yield and soil health. Meanwhile, the Plains tribes were experts in animal husbandry, understanding the migration patterns of bison like the back of their frostbitten hands. But let's be real. These strategies were born out of necessity, not some idyllic vision of living in harmony with nature. The environment was harsh and unforgiving, and if you didn't have your act together, you might as well write your own obituary. The myth of the noble savage living in perfect balance with the land is a romanticized fiction. The reality was much grittier. It was about using every tool, every scrap of knowledge, and every ounce of cooperation to survive. and maybe even sing a song or two around the fire while you were at it. So, as we navigate through this historical landscape, remember that these societies were dynamic, complex, and above all, pragmatic. They understood that survival wasn't just about braving the elements. It was about smart planning, efficient resource use, and a community that could rally together when the chips, or in this case, the snowflakes, were down. It's a lesson that's as relevant today as it was back then. When winter comes, it's not just enough to survive. You've got to outsmart it. As we trek deeper into the world of Native American winter survival, let's spotlight the unsung heroes of endurance, trade networks and alliances, arguably the original LinkedIn connections, minus the spammy endorsements. Now, you might think that when the snow started falling like it had a personal vendetta, tribes simply holed up and hoped for the best. But oh no, friend, that's just the stuff of campfire tall tales. Instead, these folks were busy wheeling and dealing, even when wheels hadn't exactly been invented yet. Trade wasn't just an economic activity. It was a lifeline, a diplomatic chess game where a well-timed exchange of corn for furs could mean the difference between a full belly and a frosty demise. The Iroquois Confederacy, for instance, was a powerhouse of barter. Their strategic location in the northeastern woodlands made them a central hub. Picture them as the Amazon prime of their day, except their deliveries actually required a bit of legwork. Corn, beans, and squash, their trusty three sisters, were traded far and wide, not just for physical survival, but also to cement alliances and peace treaties. And it wasn't all one-way traffic. The Iroquois were no strangers to receiving goods in return. Furs were a hot commodity, literally, and were traded down the line, sometimes ending up in the hands of European settlers who couldn't resist a good beaver pelt. These trades were more than just transactions. They were the glue holding a complex web of relationships together. It was like a game of Risk, but with corn and furs instead of plastic armies. Meanwhile, out on the Great Plains, the Lakota and Comanche were playing their own high-stakes game of trade and diplomacy. Bison hides were the currency of choice, and with good reason. These hides were versatile, durable, and warmer than a wool sweater knitted by your grandma. The Plains tribes used them to barter for everything from tools to foodstuffs they couldn't procure themselves during the harsh winters. When the mercury plummeted, you can bet that a well-timed trade deal was worth its weight in gold, or in this case, pemmican. But before you start picturing these trade networks as harmonious bazaars filled with cheerful haggling, let's burst that bubble. The reality was a lot more cutthroat. Tensions simmered below the surface, and disputes over trading rights could boil over faster than you can say, scalping party. For example, the Iroquois weren't just savvy traders. They were fierce protectors of their trade routes. They didn't hesitate to flex their military muscle if anyone dared to infringe on their commercial turf. And then there was the issue of European settlers, who brought their own brand of chaos to the mix. They often tried to muscle in on existing trade networks, pushing their own agendas and introducing new goods, some beneficial, others downright disastrous. Alcohol, for instance, became a particularly toxic trade item, leading to dependencies and conflicts within tribes. It was like adding gasoline to a campfire and hoping for the best. Now, let's talk diplomacy. For many tribes, trade was a strategic tool, the Swiss Army knife of intertribal relations. Alliances were often sealed with a handshake and a bag of corn, metaphorically speaking. These relationships required constant maintenance and a keen understanding of the political landscape. Leaders weren't just war chiefs. They were diplomats, mediators, and occasionally shrewd negotiators who could out-haggle the best of them. In a world where resources were as scarce as a sunbeam in a snowstorm, these alliances were critical. And when things went south, well, that's when the tomahawks came out. One particularly interesting case is the Huron-Wendat Confederacy, which became a major player in the fur trade, often acting as middlemen between other tribes and European traders. Their strategic positioning along key waterways allowed them to control the flow of goods like a maestro conducting an orchestra. Yet, this success came at a price. Competition with the Iroquois led to the infamous Beaver Wars in the 17th century, a series of brutal conflicts that reshaped the power dynamics of the region. It's a stark reminder that trade and diplomacy were as much about survival as they were about profit. So, if you're imagining a world where everyone held hands and sang Cumbare around the communal fire, think again. Trade and alliances were complex, fraught with tension, and driven by the harsh realities of survival. They were as much about power and influence as they were about resource sharing. And while the romantic notion of a peaceful, cooperative existence might be appealing, the truth is far more complicated and infinitely more interesting. As we peel back the layers of this historical onion, it becomes clear that these trade networks were more than just economic lifelines. They were the arteries of a living, breathing organism that was constantly adapting to its environment. The tribes of North America were experts at playing the long game, ensuring their survival not just through the winter months, but for generations to come. And as we continue our journey through the annals of Native American history, remember that survival was a multifaceted endeavor. It required more than just warmth and shelter. It demanded a keen understanding of politics, economy, and human nature itself. So next time you're haggling over the price of a second-hand jacket or trying to negotiate a better deal on your phone plan, spare a thought for the original masters of the trade. They didn't just survive the winter, they thrived, trading corn and furs like the pros they were, all while navigating a complex web of alliances and rivalries that would make even the most seasoned diplomat break out in a cold sweat. Now that we've tipped our hats to the trading prowess of Native American tribes, let's draw the curtains on this winter saga by reflecting on their resilience and adaptability. We're talking about a level of ingenuity that could make even a Swiss watchmaker nod in appreciation. These tribes weren't just dodging snowflakes for fun. They were crafting survival strategies that would resonate through the ages. And while the romanticized image of Native Americans living in perfect harmony with nature is as appealing as a fireside chat with hot cocoa, the truth is a bit more like a survival reality show, minus the cameras and with a lot more grit. First, let's step back and appreciate the sheer adaptability on display here. The Iroquois and their brethren weren't just hunkering down for a long winter's nap. They were strategizing, planning, and innovating at every turn. Their architectural feats alone would make any modern-day builder blush. Take the Iroquois longhouses, sprawling structures that could stretch over 200 feet, housing multiple families and withstanding winter's worst tantrums. These weren't just shelters. They were communal hubs where decisions were made, stories were spun, and let's face it, the occasional family drama unfolded. And over in the Great Plains, the Lakota teepees were masterclasses in efficiency, quick to assemble and offering warmth in a land where the wind howled like a banshee. But survival wasn't just about impressive engineering. It was about mastering the art of resource management. The Plains tribe's reliance on the bison wasn't just a matter of convenience. It was a carefully orchestrated symphony of sustainability. Every part of the bison was used, from meat to hide to bones, in a zero-waste policy that would make any environmentalist beam with pride. And those Iroquois, they didn't just farm the Three Sisters as a dietary staple. It was an agricultural strategy that maximized the land's potential while preserving its fertility. Corn, beans, and squash weren't just crops. They were a trio of survival superstars that helped ensure no one went hungry when the snow covered the fields like an overzealous baker with a tub of frosting. Now, let's not get too comfortable by the fire without addressing the myths that have grown like moss over these historical realities. The romantic notion of Native Americans living in some Edenic paradise, at one with nature, is a tale as old as time, and just as fictional as the Grimm brothers' stories. The truth was far from a peaceful commune with Mother Earth. It was a constant battle of wits and endurance, where nature was both ally and adversary. The environment was as unpredictable as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, and the tribes adapted with a flexibility that could rival any yoga master. This adaptability wasn't just a quaint historical footnote. It laid the groundwork for enduring legacies. The Iroquois Confederacy's political system, for instance, was a beacon of governance that inspired democratic principles in the nascent United States. Their great law of peace, with its emphasis on collective decision-making and checks and balances, was a direct influence on the U.S. Constitution. That's right, folks. While the Founding Fathers were busy penning their grand experiment in democracy, they were taking notes from a system that had been running smoothly for centuries. And let's not overlook the environmental legacy. The Native American approach to resource management is a lesson in sustainability that's more relevant today than ever. In a world that's increasingly grappling with the consequences of environmental neglect, the practices of these tribes serve as a poignant reminder that living in balance with nature isn't just a quaint notion, it's a necessity for survival. The careful hunting practices, the sustainable agriculture, the zero-waste mentality, these weren't just survival tactics, they were blueprints for a sustainable future. So, as we wrap up this journey through the frosty annals of Native American history, let's carry forward the lessons of resilience, adaptability, and ingenuity. These tribes weren't just surviving, they were thriving, turning the harshest of winters into a masterclass in human endurance. Their legacy isn't just etched in the history books, it's woven into the fabric of modern environmental and political thought. The romantic myths may fade, but the reality, a testament to human ingenuity and community spirit, endures like an eternal flame against the chill of time. As you sit snugly in your heated home, sipping on a hot beverage, spare a thought for these historic masters of winter who transformed survival into an art form. They remind us that when faced with adversity, humanity has an unparalleled capacity for innovation and cooperation. It's a tale worth retelling, a legacy worth preserving, and a lesson worth learning as we navigate the challenges of our modern world. So here's to the Iroquois, the Lakota, the Comanche, and all the tribes who not only survived winter's wrath, but thrived in its wake, leaving a legacy as enduring as the snow-capped peaks and the windswept plains they called home. The world into which Sun Tzu was born around 544 BC was a bit like an ancient version of Game of Thrones, minus the dragons, but with plenty of backstabbing and intrigue. Think of the spring and autumn period as China's messy teenage years. Over 170 states squabbling like siblings over who gets the biggest slice of the pie. It was a time when the term political chaos felt like an understatement. Now, amidst this backdrop of constant warfare and shifting alliances, Sun Tzu emerged. How he managed to keep his cool when everyone else was losing theirs is a mystery wrapped in a puzzle, served with a side of noodles. Sun Tzu, whose real name was Sun Wu, hailed from the state of Kai, an area which today we'd recognize as part of Shandong province. Kai was known for its intellectual crowd, a hotbed of philosophical thought. If you want to debate the meaning of life or how to properly stir-fry, Kai was the place to be. Sun Tzu's family, like many in Kai, was likely well-versed in the art of thinking deeply about things, which undoubtedly rubbed off on him. His father, Sun Ping, was a military man, which might explain Sun Tzu's early exposure to the ins and outs of battlefield tactics. Picture a young Sun Tzu at the dinner table, learning about flanking maneuvers instead of nursery rhymes. The spring and autumn period wasn't just a catchy name, it was literally a time of seasonal warfare. Imagine every spring and autumn, the nobles dusting off their armor like clockwork, ready to settle scores that had festered over the long winter. This was the world Sun Tzu knew, a revolving door of conflict, where peace was just the time it took to sharpen your swords. Despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, Sun Tzu developed a strategic mind as sharp as a well-honed blade. He seemed to embody a zen-like calmness, a strategic stoicism that was as rare as a unicorn in his era. Some might say he was born with it, but it's more likely his early life experiences and familial influences played a significant role. It's like growing up in a family of chefs. You might not be born a master of the kitchen, but after a few years, you'd know your way around a wok. Now, Sun Tzu's early years were marked by the constant shifting of power among the various states, each one trying to outmaneuver the other. This wasn't a time for idealists. It was a period where survival depended on being the smartest person in the room. Sun Tzu, with his knack for strategy, would have fit right in. He was like the kid who always aced his history exams, except his exams involved actual battles and not written tests. Despite the countless myths that have turned Sun Tzu into something of a military superhero, he was, in fact, a man of his time. His ability to stay composed amidst the chaos was not due to some mystical inner peace, but rather a keen understanding of human nature and the realities of warfare. The Art of War, his famous treatise, wasn't born out of a desire for bloodshed. It was a practical guide for survival. In fact, if Sun Tzu had been around today, he'd probably be the kind of guy who could solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute while simultaneously negotiating peace between two warring roommates. His approach was always about minimizing conflict, using strategy as a tool to achieve victory without the need for unnecessary destruction. He was the original advocate for working smarter, not harder, a philosophy that many a burned-out office worker could appreciate. The political landscape of Sun Tzu's youth was a constant reminder of the importance of strategic thinking. The rulers of the time were like chess players, forever plotting their next move. Alliances were made and broken faster than you could say checkmate, and the only constant was change itself. For Sun Tzu, understanding this ebb and flow was crucial. He was the kind of guy who could predict the end of a movie just by watching the trailer. Amidst this backdrop of intrigue and endless conflict, Sun Tzu's upbringing was undoubtedly influenced by not just his family, but the cultural and intellectual trends of the time. Kai was not only a center of military strategy, but also of Confucian thought, a philosophy that emphasized order, harmony, and the importance of relationships. This blend of strategic and philosophical education would shape Sun Tzu's thinking, and later, his writings. But let's not romanticize him too much. Sun Tzu was no monk meditating atop a mountain. He was a man who understood that the best way to win a battle was to avoid it altogether. His Zen-like calm was less about spiritual enlightenment and more about recognizing that chaos could be controlled through superior strategy. In today's terms, he'd be the guy who could walk into a chaotic stock market and come out with a profit. As we delve deeper into the life of Sun Tzu, it's important to separate the man from the myth. His story is not just one of military genius, but of a mind that thrived amidst chaos, turning the unpredictability of his world to his advantage. Sun Tzu's life and achievements remind us that while the world may be full of noise and turmoil, clarity and calm can be our greatest allies. Now, as we wade deeper into the murky waters of Sun Tzu's life, let's chat about The Art of War, the book that's been quoted more than a teenager's Instagram bio about living life to the fullest. Written in the 5th century BC, it's a masterpiece of strategic thought, crafted long before the era of tweets and TikToks challenged our attention spans. Just imagine Sun Tzu perched at a desk, quill in hand, distilling the chaotic orchestra of war into a symphony of cunning and deception. It's the sort of manual that, if it were published today, would likely have a subtitle like Winning at Life Without Breaking a Sweat. The creation of The Art of War was no mere accident. It was a response to the brutal reality that Sun Tzu lived in, a world where battles were less about the glory of the charge and more about the art of the bluff. It wasn't just a memoir of battles past. It was a survival guide for the politically savvy. Sun Tzu knew that the best way to win was often to avoid fighting entirely. His strategies were the ultimate power move, beating the opponent before the first arrow was loosed. Now, let's talk specifics. The treatise is split into 13 chapters, each as pithy and profound as a fortune cookie, but loaded with more than just vague optimism. One of the key takeaways is the emphasis on intelligence and deception. Sun Tzu famously wrote, "All warfare is based on deception," a line that could easily double as advice for a poker player or a modern-day marketer. In fact, his strategies are so applicable to business that they've become a staple in corporate training programs worldwide. Who knew that a military strategist from ancient China would become the patron saint of PowerPoint presentations? Sun Tzu's disdain for direct conflict is almost palpable. He believed in winning through psychological dominance, a concept that might sound familiar to anyone who's ever sat through a tense negotiation or a particularly cutthroat game of Monopoly. The goal was to outthink rather than outfight, a philosophy that saved lives and resources, two commodities always in short supply during the endless wars of his time. Quite the economic strategist, Sun Tzu was. He understood that protracted warfare drained more than just coffers, but the very spirit of the people. His insights into the importance of adaptability, knowing both the enemy and oneself, have been echoed through the ages. In a world where change was the only constant, being flexible was more valuable than being fearless. Sun Tzu advised that victory was assured when a leader knew when to fight and when to hold back, a lesson many of us could take to heart when deciding whether to reply all on a contentious email. Let's not forget that Sun Tzu was also a master of reading the room, or in his case, the battlefield. He stressed the significance of terrain, weather, and the morale of troops, factors that today might translate into knowing your market, understanding your client, and gauging office morale before rolling out that new initiative. His strategies were less about the glory of a decisive battle and more about the art of maneuvering, both physically and mentally. The appeal of the art of war is that it reads like a cheat sheet for life's messy battles, whether they involve actual swords or metaphorical ones. But here's the rub. While we romanticize Sun Tzu as the ultimate tactician, he wasn't just about clever tricks. His treatise hints at a man deeply aware of the human cost of war. He advocated for the swiftest possible resolution to conflicts, believing that the best victory was one that required no battle at all. It's a sentiment that would no doubt resonate with anyone who's ever been asked to take it offline during a heated meeting. Now, imagine Sun Tzu in today's corporate boardrooms, probably with a bemused expression as PowerPoint slides click by. His strategic mind would likely thrive in the age of mergers and hostile takeovers. His philosophy of knowing the enemy, as well as the terrain, would translate seamlessly into understanding market conditions and competitor strategies. He'd be the kind of CEO who could turn a hostile takeover into an acquisition party, all while sipping his morning tea. But let's not be too quick to crown him the king of the cubicles. The corporate world, with its own brand of warfare, might baffle Sun Tzu with its reliance on buzzwords and endless meetings. He'd probably argue that a well-placed memo could achieve more than a week's worth of brainstorming sessions. The truth is, Sun Tzu's strategies, while timeless, also remind us of the complex dance that is human interaction, whether on the battlefield or in the boardroom. In the grand scheme of things, the art of war is more than just a relic of military strategy. It's a testament to the power of the mind over the might. It's a reminder that sometimes the most effective strategy is the one that leaves the battlefield unscathed. Sun Tzu's work is a window into a world where survival depended on more than just the strength of an army. It relied on the nimbleness of thought and the elegance of strategy. His legacy is not just a handbook for generals, but a blueprint for anyone trying to navigate the choppy waters of life's battles. As we prepare to delve further into Sun Tzu's life, let's keep in mind that his brilliance lay not just in his strategic genius, but in his understanding of the human condition. He was a man who saw beyond the immediate gain, one who recognized that the best victories are those that require the least sacrifice. So, stay tuned, because the story of Sun Tzu is far from over, and there's still plenty to unpack about this enigmatic strategist and the world he so deftly navigated. Now that we've set the stage with Sun Tzu's philosophical musings, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of his military career, where the stakes were as high as a dragon's eyebrow. Around 512 BC, Sun Tzu found himself under the employ of King Helu of Wu, a ruler with ambitions as grand as his name was short. The kingdom of Wu was one of those states that had climbed the proverbial ladder from relative obscurity to a regional powerhouse, thanks in no small part to its strategic location and a keen desire to avoid being anyone's doormat. Enter Sun Tzu, the newly minted general, who was more than just a man with a plan. He was a man with a whole blueprint for military success. His arrival in Wu coincided with a time when the kingdom was butting heads with its neighbor, the state of Chu. Now, Chu was no pushover. It was one of the larger, more established states, kind of like the big kid on the playground who everyone secretly hoped would get a timeout. But Sun Tzu, with his penchant for cunning and strategy, saw an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Let's talk about the Battle of Baju in 506 BC, a clash that would make headlines if ancient China had a 24-hour news cycle. It was a quintessential moment where Sun Tzu's strategies were put to the test, and spoiler alert, they worked like a charm. The battle saw the forces of Wu, under the command of King Helu and Sun Tzu, take on the might of Chu. This wasn't just about soldiers clashing swords. It was a showcase of strategic brilliance. Sun Tzu approached the battle with the cool precision of a chess grandmaster, considering every move and countermove before the first arrow flew. He understood that the key to victory wasn't just in numbers, but in knowing your enemy as well as yourself. The Wu forces, despite being outnumbered, managed to secure a decisive victory. They employed deceptive tactics, including the famous use of floodwaters to disrupt Chu's formations, a move that would make any modern-day strategist tip their hat in admiration. But let's not get carried away with the romance of it all. The victory at Baju wasn't just a triumph of clever tactics. It was also a testament to the harsh realities of war. The Wu army, while victorious, had to contend with the brutal aftermath, including the inevitable casualties and the logistical nightmare of maintaining supply lines over long distances. War, as Sun Tzu knew all too well, was as much about managing resources as it was about strategic brilliance. This victory was a game-changer for Wu, shifting the balance of power in the region and raising Sun Tzu's profile from a promising strategist to a legendary general. It was like watching an indie film director suddenly win an Oscar. Sun Tzu's reputation soared beyond the borders of Wu. But with great power comes great mythologizing, and soon tales of his exploits began to take on a life of their own. Stories were told of his almost supernatural ability to predict enemy movements, and his uncanny knack for turning the tide of battle with a mere gesture. While it's tempting to imagine Sun Tzu as a kind of ancient military wizard, the reality was far more grounded. His success was rooted in an acute understanding of human behavior, logistical acumen, and the ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. The Battle of Baju was less about magical foresight and more about meticulous planning and execution. Sun Tzu's strategies relied on exploiting the weaknesses of the enemy, emphasizing speed, mobility, and an element of surprise that left the larger Chu forces floundering. Economically, the victory was significant for Wu, as it opened up trade routes and increased the kingdom's influence. The cost of war, however, wasn't just measured in treasure, but in the strain on the population and the need to maintain a standing army. Sun Tzu was acutely aware of these pressures, advocating for swift, decisive engagements that minimized prolonged conflict. His strategies were a masterclass in resource management long before spreadsheets made that sort of thing boring. The allure of Sun Tzu's success inevitably led to a few embellishments along the way. Tales of him single-handedly training entire armies with a single barked command or turning enemy generals into quivering wrecks with a mere glance have the appeal of a blockbuster fantasy. But the truth is, Sun Tzu's genius lay in his ability to see the battlefield as a living, breathing organism, where every action had a reaction and every decision had consequences. As we peel back the layers of legend surrounding Sun Tzu, it's crucial to remember that his legacy isn't just about the battles he won, but the lessons he imparted. His real-life application of strategic principles during his time as a general for Wu was the blueprint for his later writings. The art of war wasn't just a collection of abstract ideas. It was a distillation of his first-hand experiences, a guide forged in the crucible of actual combat. Sun Tzu's story doesn't end with the Battle of Baju, nor with his tenure under King Helu. His legacy continues to influence military and civilian leaders alike, a testament to the enduring power of strategic thinking. As we continue to explore his life and times, let's keep an eye on the realities behind the myths, the man behind the legend, and the strategies that still resonate today. And so, as we prepare to dive deeper into the enigmatic world of Sun Tzu, remember that his brilliance was as much about understanding people as it was about understanding war. His insights into human nature, leadership, and the art of strategy have left an indelible mark on history, one that continues to shape the way we think about conflict, competition, and the pursuit of victory. Stay tuned, because the story of Sun Tzu is far from over, and there are still plenty of battles, both real and metaphorical, to explore in the chapters ahead. Sun Tzu's enduring influence stretches far beyond the dusty battlefields of ancient China, echoing across centuries into the minds of modern strategists and leaders of all stripes. It's a bit like finding out your favorite band has been sampled in every hit song since the '80s. Unexpected yet totally fitting, as we explore how the art of war has become a guiding light across diverse cultures and eras. There's no denying that Sun Tzu's strategic playbook has transcended its military origins. Let's kick things off with Mao Zedong, a man whose revolutionary fervor reshaped China in the 20th century. Mao wasn't just a fan of Sun Tzu. He practically had a poster of him on his wall. During the Chinese Civil War and the subsequent establishment of the People's Republic of China, Mao applied Sun Tzu's teachings like a chef following a cherished family recipe, adding his own spicy twists for good measure. Mao's strategy of using guerrilla warfare tactics, hitting the enemy where they least expected it, was straight out of Sun Tzu's playbook. He famously remarked that the enemy's weaknesses were to be exploited while avoiding their strengths, a classic Sun Tzu maneuver if ever there was one. It's no exaggeration to say that Mao weaponized Sun Tzu's wisdom, using it to turn the tide of conflict in his favor. But the legacy of the art of war isn't confined to the East. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you'll find Sun Tzu's influence permeating Western military doctrine as well. During World War II, Allied commanders like General Douglas MacArthur drew upon Sun Tzu's principles to outmaneuver Axis forces. MacArthur's island-hopping strategy in the Pacific, bypassing heavily fortified positions to strike at weaker points, was a classic interpretation of Sun Tzu's emphasis on strategic flexibility and the element of surprise. It's like playing chess with someone who keeps flipping the board, always leaving you guessing. Beyond the realm of military strategy, Sun Tzu's insights have seeped into the corporate boardrooms of the modern world. Picture this: a room full of suits, each armed not with swords but with spreadsheets, all quoting Sun Tzu as if he were the latest business guru. The idea that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting has become the unofficial mantra for companies looking to outpace their competition. CEOs from Silicon Valley to Wall Street have pored over the art of war like it's the secret sauce for success. They've adapted its principles to everything from hostile takeovers to brand positioning, proving that in the dog-eat-dog world of business, Sun Tzu's teachings are as relevant as ever. But let's pause for a moment and ask, would Sun Tzu approve of his treatise being quoted in PowerPoint presentations next to pie charts and quarterly projections? It's a bit like quoting Shakespeare to justify writing a snarky email. One can imagine Sun Tzu raising an eyebrow at the idea of his profound insights being reduced to bullet points, yet there's a certain charm in the absurdity. His strategies, after all, were about understanding the human element in conflict and competition, a perspective that's just as valid in the boardroom as it was on the battlefield. The allure of Sun Tzu's work also extends to political leaders, who have used his strategies to navigate the treacherous waters of diplomacy and international relations. During the Cold War, for example, the balance of power was a delicate dance, with superpowers like the United States and the Soviet Union engaging in a strategic chess match that would have made Sun Tzu proud. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction was less about the actual use of force and more about psychological dominance, an idea that Sun Tzu would likely have found both familiar and fascinating. Economically, the application of Sun Tzu's principles can be seen in the strategies of modern global markets, where companies must constantly adapt to changing conditions or risk being left behind. Sun Tzu's emphasis on adaptability and knowing both oneself and the competition resonates with the fast-paced world of tech startups, where innovation is king and failure is but a stepping stone to success. The business world, much like the battlefield of Sun Tzu's time, is a place where the only constant is change, and those who thrive are the ones who can anticipate the next move. Yet, despite the widespread influence of the art of war, it's crucial to remember that Sun Tzu's teachings are not a one-size-fits-all solution. His insights are guidelines rather than commandments, meant to be adapted to the specific circumstances at hand. The romantic notion of a universal strategy that guarantees success in every endeavor is, like many myths, appealing but ultimately simplistic. Sun Tzu's genius lay in his ability to understand the complexities of human behavior and the unpredictability of life's challenges, a perspective that is as valuable today as it was over 2 millennia ago. As we continue to unravel the legacy of Sun Tzu, it's evident that his strategic brilliance transcends the confines of time and geography. His teachings have been interpreted and reinterpreted by countless generations, each finding new relevance in his ancient words. The enduring power of the art of war lies in its ability to speak to the human condition, offering insights into the nature of conflict, competition, and the pursuit of victory. So, as we stand on the precipice of Sun Tzu's far-reaching impact, let's keep our eyes on the horizon, ready to explore how his strategies continue to shape the world today. From the battlefield to the boardroom, from the political arena to personal challenges, Sun Tzu's legacy is a reminder that the art of strategy is as much about understanding oneself as it is about outsmarting others. Stay tuned, because the story of Sun Tzu is far from over, and there are still many more chapters to uncover in this timeless tale of strategy and survival. As we continue to unravel the legacy of Sun Tzu, it's clear that the man's shadow looms large over more than just ancient battlefields. But let's be honest, separating the myth from the man is like trying to untangle Christmas lights. It's only slightly less headache-inducing. Sun Tzu, or Sun Wu as his mother knew him, is often depicted as this all-knowing sage of strategy, a kind of Yoda with a sharper sword. Yet the reality is far less mystical and a bit more mundane. First off, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Did Sun Tzu actually write The Art of War? While it's tempting to imagine him hunched over a parchment, quill in hand, the truth is shrouded in as much mist as a morning on the Yangtze River. Historians debate whether the text was penned by him or pieced together by his disciples. Think of it like the band Kiss. Sure, Gene Simmons is the face of it, but at some point, you realize it's a group effort. Sun Tzu's life, like many historical figures, is a tapestry woven with threads of both fact and fiction. The stories of him turning a gaggle of palace concubines into a disciplined fighting force with a snap of his fingers are, shall we say, a bit embellished. If he could really command troops that easily, he'd be running a boot camp for rebellious teenagers today. Yet, these tales persist because they tap into our love for the extraordinary, our hunger for heroes who can transform chaos into order with little more than a sharp glance. And why not? In an age where warfare feels less about swords and more about silicon chips, the idea of a Sun Tzu who can master any conflict is downright comforting. His teachings have certainly found a new battleground in the digital realm, where cyber warfare is as real and as dangerous as any ancient skirmish. Just ask anyone who's tried to survive a day without Wi-Fi. It's practically a siege. The modern battlefield is no longer confined to muddy fields or open plains. It's in the algorithms of tech giants, the cybersecurity breaches that can cripple companies in seconds, and the economic sanctions that wield power as effectively as any army. Sun Tzu's insistence on knowing both oneself and the enemy has never been more relevant. In a world where a single keyboard stroke can launch 1,000 cyber attacks, understanding the terrain has taken on a whole new meaning. Let's not forget the economic battlefield, where Sun Tzu's principles have been drafted into the service of capitalism. The boardroom may not have the visceral thrill of battle, but make no mistake, it's a war zone in its own right. Companies deploy tactics that will be familiar to any ancient general, using mergers, acquisitions, and even the odd hostile takeover as their weapons of choice. Sun Tzu's teachings on deception and adaptation are just as applicable here as they were on the fields of Baju. If he were alive today, he might even offer a seminar titled How to Win Friends and Influence Markets. So, what about Sun Tzu's LinkedIn profile, you ask? Imagine it. Experienced military strategist and author of The Art of War. Skills include deception, strategic planning, and conflict resolution. Endorsed by Genghis Khan, Julius Caesar, and every CEO who ever quoted me in a PowerPoint presentation. His profile picture could be a tasteful black and white shot, chin resting thoughtfully on his hand, perhaps with a tagline like, "Turning the tide of battle, one strategy at a time." But beyond the humor lies a deeper truth about Sun Tzu's enduring appeal. His insights into human nature and leadership transcend the particulars of time and place. He understood that the key to winning any conflict was not brute force, but strategic finesse. His legacy is a testament to the power of the mind over the might, a reminder that sometimes the most effective strategy is the one that doesn't leave a trail of destruction in its wake. As we bring our exploration of Sun Tzu's life and impact to a close, it's worth reflecting on why his teachings have persisted while others have faded into the annals of history. Perhaps it's because they speak to something fundamental about the human condition, the struggle to find order in chaos, to navigate the complexities of human relationships, and to achieve victory without unnecessary sacrifice. In a world where the stakes are high and the challenges are many, Sun Tzu's wisdom offers a guiding light. Whether on the battlefield, in the boardroom, or in the digital ether, his strategies remind us that the art of war is as much about understanding oneself as it is about outsmarting others. And that, dear listener, is a lesson worth remembering even in the quiet moments as you drift off to sleep, dreaming of ancient battles and modern victories. Deep in the annals of history, where the sand meets the story, lies the kingdom of Kush. Nestled south of the flashy pyramids and Nile selfies of Egypt, Kush has often been overshadowed by its northern neighbor. But hold your hieroglyphs, because Kush was no mere Egyptian sidekick. Around 2500 BCE, this kingdom began carving out its own narrative, and trust me, it's one worth a scroll. Let's talk geography. Kush had a prime spot along the Nile, which was basically the ancient equivalent of beachfront property. This stretch of fertile land was like winning the agricultural lottery. The Nile wasn't just a lazy river. It was the lifeline for trade, agriculture, and transportation. Imagine having Amazon Prime, but with papyrus boats and a few extra crocodiles. It connected Kush not only to Egypt, but to the broader world, from the Mediterranean down to the depths of Africa. In ancient geopolitics, Kush was the cool kid with the riverside condo, and everybody wanted an invite. Now, you might be thinking, weren't they just Egypt light? Oh, honey, no. While Egypt was busy building pyramids and writing love letters to the sun god Ra, Kush was developing its own rich culture and economy. The kingdom was known for its wealth in gold, ebony, and ivory. No wonder the Egyptians kept popping over for friendly visits. Kush had resources that would make any pharaoh's eyeliner run with envy. Speaking of Egyptians, their relationship with Kush was like that of neighbors with an awkward fence dispute. Sometimes they were frenemies, exchanging goods and guards like it was no big deal. Other times, they were more like two cats in a bag, with Egypt trying to assert dominance and Kush giving just as good as it got. Around 1500 BCE, the Egyptians decided they wanted a little more Kush in their empire and took over for a few centuries. But Kush was not one to be kept under papyrus wraps for long. The appeal of Kush was more than just material. It was a melting pot of cultures, which is a fancy way of saying things got pretty eclectic. The blending of African traditions with Egyptian influence created a unique cultural tapestry. Think of it like ancient fusion cuisine, but with less quinoa and more hieroglyphics. Kush also had its own version of the pyramids. Yeah, they might have been smaller and less famous, but hey, size isn't everything. These pyramids were steeper and had their own architectural flair. It was like Kush saying, we can build triangles too, but with extra zest. The kingdom's strategic location wasn't just for show. It played a crucial role in its rise to power. With access to both African and Mediterranean trade routes, Kush became a bustling hub of commerce. The kingdom's people were skilled traders, dealing in goods that were the ancient world's equivalent of high-demand stock. Gold, incense, exotic animals, if it glittered or growled, Kush was trading it. In many ways, Kush was the underdog story of ancient Africa. It had to navigate the complex web of alliances and enmities that defined the ancient world. It wasn't all golden sunsets and royal feasts. There were challenges aplenty. But through it all, Kush managed to maintain its identity and influence, even when Egypt tried to make it a permanent annex. So, while the pharaohs might have had their flashy monuments and elaborate afterlife plans, the kingdom of Kush was quietly building a legacy of its own. It was a story of resilience, trade, and a little bit of architectural one-upmanship. Stay tuned, because the adventure of Kush is just getting started. Now, let's dive headfirst into the gold-dusted saga of the Kushite economy, where ivory tower aspirations met the vibrant chaos of ancient trade. Picture this. The kingdom of Kush, shining like a gold nugget in the desert, was the bay and say of the ancient economic world, fiercely independent and in high demand. With a treasure chest of natural resources, Kush didn't need Wall Street wizards or spreadsheet sorcery to become an economic powerhouse. Nope, they did it the old-fashioned way, through savvy trade and a little bit of elbow grease. First up, let's talk gold. We're not just talking a little bling for the royal bling-bling. No, Kush was swimming in gold like Scrooge McDuck. The region of Nubia was rich with gold mines, making Kush the place to be if you wanted to impress the ancient Joneses. By the time Egypt came knocking in the New Kingdom period, around 1500 BCE, they were practically salivating over Kush's golden abundance. But what did Kush do with all that dough, you ask? They traded it, of course. Gold was the ancient currency, the Bitcoin of its day, but with a little less volatility and a lot more physical weight. Gold wasn't the only shiny object in Kush's portfolio. Ivory was another hot commodity. In an era when elephants were more than just the largest land animals, they were the jumbo jets of trade goods. Ivory was a status symbol. Kush had access to plenty of elephants roaming the savannas, which meant they could supply ivory to places as far-flung as the Mediterranean. Imagine the awkwardness of those trade negotiations, though. I'll give you 5 tusks for that load of wine. And just like that, the ivory trade was a trunk-to-hand operation. But let's not forget about iron. Around 1000 BCE, while the rest of the world was still figuring out how to work bronze, the Kushites were forging ahead with iron. This wasn't just a step up, it was a quantum leap. Iron tools and weapons were stronger, more durable, and cheaper to produce, which meant that Kush could manufacture them in bulk. They didn't just keep this metallurgical magic to themselves, either. They traded iron goods across Africa and beyond, boosting their economic standing and their ability to defend themselves against any overly ambitious neighbors. Kush didn't operate in a vacuum, though. Their strategic location along the Nile and their control of overland trade routes meant they were plugged into a vast network of commerce. Picture a bustling marketplace where Greek olives, Arabian spices, and African gold all exchanged hands. The Kushites knew the art of the deal long before it was a bestseller. They were the original traders, crisscrossing continents and connecting cultures, all without the help of Google Translate. Now, let's bust a few myths that have clung to the narrative like sand to a sandal. There's this romantic image of ancient trade as a series of peaceful exchanges among noble merchants. In reality, it was more like Game of Thrones, but with better weather and fewer dragons. Trade routes were rife with danger, from bandits to hostile tribes. And while Kush's iron weapons were a selling point, they were also a necessity for protecting caravans and settlements. This was the harsh reality. Trade was as much about survival as it was about profit. And what about those infamous pyramids of Kush? Sure, they were architectural marvels, but they didn't just spring up because someone had a penchant for triangles. They were funded by the thriving economy. Gold and ivory financed labor and materials, and iron tools made construction more feasible. So the next time someone tells you about the mystery of pyramid building, just nod and think, follow the money. But here's the kicker. All this economic prowess didn't mean Kush was a utopia of wealth and prosperity for everyone. While the elite basked in gold-plated luxury, commoners dealt with the daily grind of life in an ancient kingdom. The gap between the haves and the have-nots was as real then as it is now. Sobering reminder that history repeats itself, even when it's wearing a golden crown. As we wade through the sands of time, the story of Kush continues to unfold. We haven't even scratched the surface of their political maneuvering or the cultural exchanges that made this kingdom a beacon of ancient innovation. So stay tuned, because the chronicles of Kush are far from over, and the best parts are still to come. As we wade further into the rich sands of Kushite history, let's zoom in on one of the most audacious power moves in antiquity. We're talking about Pi, the Kushite king who decided to play chess with the big boys up north, and spoiler alert, he won. In 747 BCE, Pi took a look at Egypt, a land that had once subjugated his ancestors, and thought, why not turn the tables? This was no small ambition, folks. Conquering Egypt was like aiming to take over Wall Street with a lemonade stand. Yet Pi made it happen. Pi's conquest of Egypt wasn't just about flexing military muscle, though there was plenty of that. It was a tapestry woven with threads of diplomacy, religious influence, and a dash of psychological warfare. Pi understood that if he wanted to rule, he had to do more than just march his troops across the desert. He needed to play the long game, and he played it like a seasoned Vegas card shark. First off, Pi capitalized on Egypt's internal chaos. By the time he set his sights on Egypt, the once mighty civilization was a patchwork quilt of petty kingdoms and squabbling warlords. Picture a high school cafeteria where everyone's vying for the last slice of pizza. Pi saw the opportunity in this disunity and seized it like a pro. His strategy was to present himself not just as a conqueror, but as a unifier. He positioned himself as the savior of Egypt's fractured soul, a narrative that even the most skeptical Egyptian might find appealing. But let's not sugarcoat it. Pi's advance into Egypt was also a display of military prowess. His army wasn't just a ragtag bunch. They were well-trained and equipped, thanks to Kush's booming economy and iron mastery. And here's the kicker. Pi didn't just rely on brute force. He understood the power of symbolism. He famously called on the Egyptian gods, particularly Ammon, to bless his campaign, blending religious fervor with military might. It was a masterstroke that made it hard for Egyptians to see him as an outsider. In the end, Pi's conquest was a blend of art and science. He didn't just sweep in with swords blazing. He conducted his campaigns like a maestro. When he finally reached Memphis, the heart of Egypt, he laid siege with a precision that would make modern generals nod in approval. He didn't sack the city for the sake of destruction. He did it to send a message. And the message was crystal clear. Kush was here to stay. Pi's victory set the stage for the 25th dynasty, a period when Kushite kings ruled over Egypt. This wasn't just a change of guard. It was a seismic shift in regional power dynamics. The Kushites brought a fresh perspective to governance, blending their own traditions with the best of Egyptian culture. They didn't just mimic Egyptian rulers, they redefined them. The Kushite kings were like that indie band that comes in and revitalizes the music scene with their unique sound. Now, let's address the myths. Some say the Kushite rule in Egypt was a golden era of peace and prosperity. Sounds nice, right? But let's not get swept away by romanticism. While the 25th dynasty did see some stability, it was no utopia. The Kushite kings had to navigate a complex political landscape rife with intrigue and betrayal. They were like tightrope walkers in a circus, balancing between maintaining control and keeping the Egyptian elite on their side. And trust me, those elites had daggers hidden in their togas, metaphorically speaking. Economically, Kushite rule brought about a fascinating blend of trade and cultural exchange. With control over Egypt, Kush was like a kid in a candy store, accessing a wealth of resources and trade networks that stretched throughout the ancient world. They didn't just rest on their laurels. They expanded trade routes and fostered relationships with other powers. It was like the ancient version of networking, but with more camels and fewer business cards. Of course, ruling over Egypt was a double-edged sword. While it brought prestige, it also painted a target on Kush's back. The Assyrians, those relentless empire builders, were eyeing Egypt like a hawk. They viewed the Kushite rule as an affront to their ambitions, and conflict was inevitable. The Kushites had to deal with these external threats while keeping internal dissent at bay. The Assyrian threat was like having a nosy neighbor who keeps trying to peek over your fence. Only this neighbor had a massive army at their disposal. In the end, the Kushite king's rule over Egypt was a testament to their ambition and strategic brilliance. But it was also a reminder of the harsh realities of empire building. It wasn't just about conquest. It was about maintaining control and navigating the ever-shifting sands of politics. They weren't just kings. They were jugglers, diplomats, and warriors, all rolled into one. So, as we look at the legacy of the Kushite rulers in Egypt, let's remember that it was a time of both triumph and tribulation. The 25th dynasty was a chapter in the epic story of Kush, a tale of ambition, power, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. But the story doesn't end here. The sands of time have more secrets to reveal, and we're just getting started. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the saga of Kush, with all its twists, turns, and timeless lessons. As we continue unraveling the saga of the Kingdom of Kush, let's sidestep from the high-stakes Game of Thrones to something equally grand, Kush's cultural and architectural legacy. If you thought pyramids were Egypt's exclusive party trick, think again. The Kushites had their own spin on these stone behemoths, and they were anything but knockoffs. Enter the city of Meroe, the thriving heart of Kush that lay about 200 kilometers northeast of modern-day Khartoum. Meroe was the kind of place that made you want to put down roots, literally. We're talking over 200 pyramids, folks darting the landscape like a giant's chess set. But unlike the Egyptian pyramids, which rose like gentle slopes, the Kushite ones were tall, narrow, and steep-sided. It's as if the architects were dared to see how many blocks they could stack before someone cried Jenga. Now, why make pyramids at all? Here's the kicker. While Egypt's pyramids were grandiose tombs for pharaohs who fancied themselves gods, the Kushite pyramids were more modest. They were built on a human scale, for kings and queens who were revered, sure, but not quite deified. It was like Kush was saying, "We love a good pyramid, but let's keep things relatable." And while the Egyptian pyramids were constructed over decades with a seemingly endless supply of labor, the Kushites built their monuments with speed and efficiency. Some were erected in just a few months, a testament to their practical approach and resourcefulness. The pyramids of Meroe weren't just architectural feats, they were cultural statements. They embodied the Kushites' unique blend of African traditions and Egyptian influences, a physical manifestation of their identity. Plus, they were adorned with intricate carvings and reliefs that told stories of gods, kings, and everyday life. If Egyptian hieroglyphs were the ancient world's Snapchat, then the carvings at Meroe were a full-blown Instagram story, rich, detailed, and sometimes a little too graphic for the faint of heart. Speaking of stories, let's talk about the mysterious language of Meroitic. The Kushites weren't just about building, they were also about creating a distinct cultural identity. Around the 2nd century BCE, they developed their own script, a series of squiggles and darts that look like they might have been invented during a particularly raucous game of Pictionary. But this wasn't just a fun party trick. The Meroitic script was the first writing system developed in Africa south of the Sahara. Talk about breaking new ground. Here's where things get intriguing. Despite existing for centuries, the Meroitic script remains largely undeciphered. It's like the Kushites left us an epic riddle, one that has left historians and linguists scratching their heads for ages. We know it was used in inscriptions and on monuments, but its exact content remains a mystery. It's as if the Kushites are whispering secrets through the sands of time, and we're left with only tantalizing glimpses of their world. It's a humbling reminder of how much we still have to learn about this ancient civilization. Now, let's not romanticize too much. While the allure of deciphering an ancient script is compelling, the reality is that Meroitic was likely a practical tool for administration and recording transactions, a sort of bureaucratic lingua franca. It's a sobering thought. While we chase the poetry and mystery, the Meroites might have just been jotting down tax records and grocery lists. Culturally, Meroe was a melting pot, where the Kushites took the best bits of their African roots and Egyptian influences and mixed them into something uniquely their own. They were like cultural DJs, remixing styles and traditions into an eclectic set that had everyone dancing to their beat. They had their own gods, too, like Apidamak, the lion-headed warrior deity who was the ancient equivalent of a rock star, commanding respect and awe. The city of Meroe itself was a bustling hub, not just for culture but for trade. And let's talk economics, because this was no backwater kingdom. Meroe was the epicenter of a trade network that stretched from the Mediterranean to sub-Saharan Africa. Iron smelting was their thing, and they were good at it. They cranked out iron tools and weapons like ancient blacksmith ninjas, fueling both their economy and their military might. The city was a hive of activity, where traders and artisans mingled. The air was thick with the smell of smelting iron and the promise of opportunity. But let's not gloss over the hardships. Life in Meroe, as in all of Kush, was a balancing act between prosperity and the harsh realities of the ancient world. The city thrived under the Kushites' control, but it wasn't immune to the challenges of drought, resource competition, and the ever-present threat of conflict. It was a constant juggling act, where innovation and resilience were the keys to survival. As we peel back the layers of Kush's cultural legacy, it's clear that the kingdom was a complex tapestry of innovation, tradition, and adaptation. They weren't just mimicking their neighbors. They were redefining what it meant to be a power in the ancient world. And while the pyramids and the Meroitic script are tantalizing clues to their past, they are only pieces of a much larger puzzle. So, as we stand among the sands of Meroe, gazing at the pyramids that rise against the horizon, let's remember that the story of Kush is one of both legend and reality. It's a tale of ingenuity, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of identity in a world that was constantly shifting beneath their feet. The kingdom of Kush might have been overshadowed by its northern neighbor, but it carved out a legacy all its own, one that continues to captivate and challenge us today. And as we look to the future, who knows what secrets the sands of Kush have yet to reveal. Stay tuned as we continue to delve deeper into the chronicles of this remarkable kingdom. The story is far from over, and the best is yet to come. But as we stand in awe of Kush's towering achievements, it's time to pull the curtain back on the final act. Every epic tale has its conclusion, and for Kush, this came around 350 CE when the kingdom found itself caught in a perfect storm of calamities. We're talking natural disasters, economic nosedives, and those pesky neighbors who just couldn't keep their spears to themselves. Let's start with the environmental curveballs. Picture the once bountiful Nile behaving like a teenage drama queen, throwing tantrums in the form of floods and droughts. The Nile, Kush's lifeline, its Amazon prime with a side of crocodiles, became erratic. Inconsistent flooding meant that agriculture, the backbone of Kush's economy, started to wobble like a Jenga tower on the edge of collapse. Add in deforestation and overgrazing around Merre, and you've got a recipe for ecological disaster. It was as if Mother Nature decided to swap the script for a disaster movie, and spoiler, it wasn't a blockbuster hit for Kush. Next, let's talk economics. While Kush's trade network had once been as bustling as a Black Friday sale, by the 4th century CE, things were looking grim. The Roman Empire, Kush's trading partner, was in decline, and this wasn't a good look for the Kushite economy. Gold, ivory, and iron weren't flying off the shelves like they used to, and the treasury started looking emptier than a pharaoh's tomb after a grave robbery. The kingdom's financial woes were compounded by the rise of the Aksumite Empire to the southeast. Aksum was like the new kid on the block, with cooler gadgets, and a knack for trade that made Kush look like it was still using dial-up in a broadband world. Which brings us to the neighbors. Aksum wasn't just a trade rival, it was a political threat. With an eye on expansion, the Aksumites were the kind of neighbors who borrowed your lawnmower and never gave it back. Except in this case, the lawnmower was an entire kingdom. Around 350 CE, King Ezana of Aksum decided to put his stamp on history by conquering Kush. His armies swept in, and Merre, once the jewel of the Kushite crown, was left in ruins. It was a hostile takeover that would have made even the most ruthless modern CEO nod in grim admiration. As we watch Kush's decline, it's tempting to romanticize it as a tragic fall from grace. But let's be real. The kingdom didn't simply fade into the sunset. It was a complex, gritty unraveling, filled with human follies, strategic missteps, and external pressures that would have tested any civilization. The end of Kush was more of a slow fizzle than a dramatic curtain call, underscoring the harsh reality that no empire, no matter how mighty, is immune to the ravages of time and circumstance. Yet, even in its decline, Kush left a legacy that looms large. The Kushites were pioneers, blending cultures and ideas in ways that would echo through the centuries. Their pyramids, though less famous than Egypt's, stand as monuments to a civilization that dared to carve its own identity in a world dominated by larger powers. The Meroitic script, though still a mystery, is a testament to their innovative spirit. It's like a forgotten diary waiting to be read, filled with secrets that could rewrite our understanding of ancient history. Kush's influence didn't just vanish with its political power. The cultural exchanges it fostered and the trade routes it established laid the groundwork for future civilizations in Africa. The kingdom's story reminds us that history is less about the monuments we leave behind and more about the ideas and connections that transcend time. So, what's the takeaway from the saga of Kush? Perhaps it's a reminder that history is not just a series of conquests and collapses. It's a vibrant tapestry woven from the triumphs and tragedies of countless civilizations, each leaving its mark on the world. Kush might have been overshadowed by its northern neighbor, but it carved out a space in the annals of history that endures to this day. It's a story of resilience, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of identity, a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us as we navigate our own complex world. And so, as we close this chapter on the Kingdom of Kush, let's carry forward the lessons of its rise and fall. Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the past is never truly past. It's a guide, a cautionary tale, and an endless source of inspiration. The sands of Kush may have shifted, but its story remains, waiting to be discovered by those bold enough to dig beneath the surface. The sun cracks open the sky, throwing a soft, defiant light over the horizon, and there you are, nestled in your roundhouse. The floor might be dirt, but it's your dirt, and after a night spent away from the elements, it's oddly comforting. You stretch, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and prepare to face a day that's anything but leisurely. Welcome to life as a Neolithic farmer, where the concept of a weekend is as foreign as Wi-Fi. Your first task, even before your brain fully wakes up, is to deal with the livestock. Forget about grabbing a cup of coffee. It's time to check on the goats and pigs. Domesticated animals are the backbone of your life, the original multi-tool of the Neolithic era. They give you milk, meat, and maybe even a little companionship if you're feeling sentimental. Goats, in particular, are like the Swiss Army knives of the animal world. They're hardy, adaptable, and will eat just about anything, which is handy when fodder is scarce. Now, let's talk about pigs. These creatures are not just bacon on legs, they're practically a mobile garbage disposal unit. They'll consume leftovers and turn them into, well, pig. That's a neat little trick when resources are limited. In the absence of currency, livestock is your wealth. A pig might not fit in your wallet, but it sure beats a credit card when you need to barter for some grain. Perhaps you've heard of the term piggy bank. It's rooted in the reality that these animals were once portable savings accounts. But before you get too cozy with the idea of pastoral bliss, let's debunk a myth. This isn't some serene, rural idyll where you commune with nature. Tending to livestock means early mornings, late nights, and a constant battle against nature's whims. There are no barns here, no fenced pastures. You're sharing your living space with these animals, and the human-animal boundary is as blurred as a bad Instagram filter. Your settlement is a small, tight-knit community, more like an extended family than a town. You're looking at a population of maybe 50 souls, all pulling together to survive. The roundhouses, simple but effective, are clustered together for warmth and protection. Forget about personal space. In a Neolithic community, privacy is a luxury no one can afford. The walls of your home are made from wattle and daub, a fancy way of saying mud and sticks. It's not exactly the Ritz, but it keeps the rain off your head. The economic structure of your society is all about subsistence. You grow what you eat, you wear what you can make, and you trade what you can spare. It's a barter economy, and livestock is your stock market. No one's getting rich, but the stakes are high. If your animals thrive, you thrive. If they don't, well, that's a conversation with hunger you'd rather avoid. As you milk the goats, you're reminded of just how crucial these animals are. Goat milk is a staple, and it's not just for drinking. You can make cheese, butter, and even trade it for other necessities. That's right, your morning routine isn't just about survival. It's about maintaining your economic status. Every drop of milk, every piglet born is an asset. In this world, the modern conveniences we take for granted are absent. No tractors, no feed stores, no vet on speed dial. You're the farmer, the vet, and sometimes the undertaker. It's a lot to juggle, and yet you and your community make it work, day in and day out. This is the reality of Neolithic farming, a life of constant motion, endless tasks, and little room for error. So, as you finish milking and move on to the next task, remember this. Every step you take this morning is a dance with survival, a delicate balance of resourcefulness and resilience. Your day is only just beginning, and it promises to be as demanding as it is rewarding. With the goats milked and your stomach growling for some breakfast, you throw on your trusty, worn leather sandals and step out into the fresh, albeit earthy morning air. It's time to hit the fields, where the real backbone of your Neolithic existence takes root, literally. As you walk with your fellow village members, you can feel the weight of the task ahead, tilling the land with tools that are as rudimentary as they are essential. This isn't some bucolic escape into a simpler time. It's a full-contact sport without the luxury of a sports massage afterward. Your tool of choice is a wooden plow, nothing fancy, just a simple contraption carved from the trunk of a tree. Think of it as the Neolithic version of a Swiss watch. Reliable, functional, and absolutely crucial. It's not pulling itself, though. That's where your oxen or, occasionally, your fellow villagers come in. You hitch them up, and together you coax the earth into giving up its bounty. Today's menu: emmer wheat and barley, the dynamic duo of ancient grains that form your diet's backbone. Forget about quinoa bowls or chia seeds. It's these grains that keep your community's collective belly full. Now, let's debunk the myth of the idyllic farmer's life. This isn't a scene from a Renaissance painting where everyone's draped in flowing robes, basking in the sun. Farming is back-breaking work, and those wooden plows don't glide over the earth like butter. You're engaging in a wrestling match with the soil, and it's a fight that requires both grit and ingenuity. The flint tools you wield are sharp, but rudimentary, a far cry from the precision instruments we have today. Every swing, every cut into the earth, is a testament to human endurance and creativity. As you toil away, you might find yourself daydreaming about modern conveniences, a tractor, perhaps, or even just a decent pair of gloves. But back here in reality, it's all about teamwork. Farming is communal, a group effort that binds your small society closer than the fibers of your hand-woven tunic. You share tools, labor, and the fruits of your efforts, because that's how survival works in a world with no grocery stores or Amazon deliveries. The community aspect isn't just a necessity, it's a survival strategy, as essential as the crops you're planting. The seasonal cycles dictate your life like clockwork. Spring is for planting, summer for nurturing, fall for harvesting, and winter for praying you've done enough. These cycles are as predictable as they are unforgiving. Miss a planting window, and you might as well start rationing your grain. The seasons don't wait for late arrivals, and there's no app to remind you that it's time to harvest. It's all about intuition, observation, and a little luck. Farmers today might lament unpredictable weather, but for you, every drop of rain or ray of sunshine carries the weight of survival. And let's talk numbers, because math isn't just for accountants and high school nightmares. It's a matter of life and death. An acre of emmer wheat might yield around 1,000 pounds of grain, which sounds like a lot, until you factor in a community of 50 people with appetites. That grain has to stretch through lean times and feed not only humans, but the animals that help you farm. It's a delicate balance, a juggling act, where dropping the ball means empty bellies. Forget about the romantic notion of farming as a noble pursuit. It's a numbers game where the stakes are as high as they get. The romanticized image of the simple farming life often overlooks the sheer labor it demands. You're not just growing food, you're crafting a future, one seed at a time. It takes ingenuity to coax life from barren soil, to navigate the whims of nature without the benefit of modern science or technology. Your knowledge of the land is passed down through generations, each farmer adding their own insights and techniques to the collective wisdom. This isn't just survival, it's an evolving art form, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. As the sun climbs higher, beating down with relentless intensity, you wipe the sweat from your brow and look at the field. It's not just a patch of land, it's your lifeline, your legacy, your community's hope for the next season. Every grain that sprouts is a small victory, a sign that your labor, your community's labor, is bearing fruit. The romantic appeal of farming may lie in its simplicity, but the reality is a complex web of effort, cooperation, and innovation. So, as you take a brief break, feeling the weight of your labor in every muscle, remember this: farming in the Neolithic era isn't just about feeding mouths. It's about building a foundation, one furrow at a time, for a future that's as sturdy as those wooden plows. There's no room for error, but there's plenty of room for pride in a job well done, a field well planted, and a community well fed. And while your day is far from over, you've already laid the groundwork for what could be a bountiful harvest, as long as those pesky weather gods cooperate. As you wipe the sweat from your brow and admire the field, your stomach lets out a growl that's louder than a Neolithic thunderstorm. It's time for a well-deserved break, a moment to refuel with the midday meal that's as much a social ritual as it is a necessity. Forget about food trucks or artisanal sandwiches. The lunch menu here is all about function over flair. Bread, porridge, maybe some smoked fish or dried meat if you're lucky. It's not Michelin star dining, but it'll keep you going, more like the prehistoric equivalent of a power bar. First up, the classic duo, bread and porridge. Bread is a staple, made from the emmer wheat you've been toiling over. This isn't your fluffy artisan sourdough. It's more of a dense, flat affair, a little like a prehistoric pita. The porridge, thick and hearty, is the glue that holds your meal, and frankly your day together. It's a simple concoction of grains and water, maybe jazzed up with a bit of honey if the bees have been feeling generous. It's not about taste, it's about fuel. Now you might be thinking, hey, isn't this diet super healthy? Well, let's debunk that myth. Sure, the Neolithic diet is free from processed junk, but it's also free from a lot of nutrients we take for granted. With no vitamin supplements or kale smoothies in sight, nutritional deficiencies are a real risk. Vitamin D is scarce unless you spend a lot of time sunbathing, which isn't exactly on the agenda when you're busy farming. And calcium. Hope you like goat milk, because that's your main source. Anemia is a frequent, unwanted guest at the Neolithic dinner table, thanks to iron-deficient, grain-heavy meals. And let's not forget about the challenge of food preservation. Without refrigeration, keeping food edible is a constant battle against time and temperature. Smoked fish and dried meat are your best friends here, a prehistoric approach to making sure your protein doesn't spoil before you get a chance to eat it. It might not sound glamorous, but when your choices are limited, you make do. Salt is a precious commodity, not just for flavor, but for its preservative powers. It's traded, hoarded, and even fought over, because in a world without frigid air, it's your best bet for keeping food from turning into something only your pigs would eat. As you gather around with your community, lunch becomes more than just a meal. It's a social affair, a chance to catch up, share stories, and maybe even swap a joke or two. Communal eating isn't just a way to fill your belly, it's a glue that binds your community together. Gathering around the fire, you share everything: food, conversation, and the occasional gripe about the grueling work. It's the original social network, minus the dodgy privacy settings. This isn't just about sharing food, it's about sharing life, blending personal stories with the collective narrative of the community. You might think of it as the Neolithic version of the water cooler chat, minus the office politics. It's a time to relax, if only for a moment, before diving back into the day's relentless grind. And speaking of grind, let's circle back to that myth of the healthier ancient diet. Sure, there's no fast food or sugary sodas, but there's also no variety. You're working with what you can grow, gather, or barter for. The idea that ancient diets were inherently healthier is one of those myths that sounds good until you scratch beneath the surface. The reality is a tightrope walk of getting just enough nutrients to stave off deficiencies while hoping the next harvest doesn't disappoint. As you finish your meal, you might cast a wistful glance towards the horizon, dreaming of the day when you won't have to rely on trial and error to get your vitamins. But for now, it's back to the fields, because those emmer grains aren't going to plant themselves. Every bite of your midday meal is a reminder of why you toil, a testament to the delicate balance between man, nature, and necessity. And while you might not have a fridge full of colorful veggies or a pantry stocked with superfoods, you have something that many modern folks lack: a profound connection to the earth, a shared purpose with your community, and the satisfaction of knowing that every meal is a direct result of your own hard work. It's not just survival, it's a testament to human resilience and adaptability in the face of endless challenges. So as you gather your tools, ready to face the second half of your day, take a moment to appreciate the meal you've shared. It's a microcosm of Neolithic life, simple, practical, and deeply intertwined with the rhythm of the land and the people around you. And while the work ahead is daunting, you're fueled in body and spirit, ready to tackle whatever challenges the afternoon might bring. With your midday meal a pleasant memory, and the afternoon sun easing into a gentle simmer, it's time to pivot from farming to the fine arts of survival, Neolithic style. Contrary to what that pastoral myth might have you believe, a farmer's life isn't all about tilling soil and dodging rain clouds. It's also about crafting the essentials that keep your community thriving, like pottery and textiles. Now, don't roll your eyes just yet. These aren't just hobbies to pass the time. They're the backbone of social and economic survival. So, let's dive into the clay pit of history. Pottery isn't just about making cute little vases. It's the ancient Tupperware, the original meal prep savior. Those clay pots are crucial for storing grains, liquids, and preserving food. A well-crafted pot is more than a container. It's a lifeline. And here's a fun fact. Our Neolithic ancestors weren't slapping clay around willy-nilly. They had specific techniques like coiling and pinching to create durable, functional wares. The average pot took hours to make and was often decorated with intricate patterns, a bit like Instagram-worthy latte art, but with more staying power. The economic impact of pottery. Think of it as a prehistoric stock exchange. Parts were traded across vast distances, sometimes hundreds of miles, along trade routes that stretched across what we now call Europe and Asia. Your handcrafted bowl might end up in a village you've never even heard of, exchanged for something exotic like Baltic amber or Mediterranean seashells. This isn't just bartering goods, it's bartering connections, building a network as sturdy as the parts themselves. Now, let's not glaze over the social side of things. Pottery making was often a communal activity, a chance for villagers to gather, share techniques, and maybe even gossip about who's courting whom. It's like your local pottery class, except everyone's a little more concerned with survival than aesthetics. The skills learned around the communal fire weren't just about crafting vessels. They were about crafting relationships, strengthening the ties that bind your community together. Moving on from clay to cloth, weaving was another cornerstone of Neolithic life, and it wasn't just to keep you warm. Textiles were a display of skill and status. Our ancestors used looms that looked like something out of a minimalist's dream. Simple, yet highly effective. They worked with materials like flax and wool, transforming raw fibers into textiles that could be as coarse as a burlap sack or as fine as a modern-day cashmere scarf, depending on your weaving prowess. Social significance of textiles was woven into the very fabric of society. Clothing wasn't just about modesty or protection from the elements. It was a statement. Who knew your tunic could say so much? Your ability to produce fine textiles could elevate your standing in the community, turning you from that guy who keeps goats to that guy with the enviable wardrobe. And just like pottery, textiles were a hot commodity on the trade routes, fetching goods and status alike. Economically speaking, these crafts were as vital as the crops in your field. They allowed for diversification in trade, reducing the community's dependence on a single resource. Think of it as an ancient version of financial diversification. If the harvest was poor, the parts and textiles could be your saving grace, traded for food and other necessities. It's a stark reminder that farming wasn't just about plowing fields. It was about cultivating a wide array of skills to hedge against the unpredictability of life. Now, let's tackle that myth of the Neolithic farmer as a one-trick plow pony. The romantic image of a simple farmer, isolated and self-sufficient, is just that, a romantic image. In reality, survival required a Swiss army knife of skills, from farming and animal husbandry to pottery and weaving. Each skill was a thread in the tapestry of survival, and missing even one could unravel the whole thing. This wasn't just about scraping by. It was about thriving in a world where the stakes were as high as a Neolithic thunderstorm cloud. Craftsmanship also played a critical role in social cohesion. These communal activities weren't just about making parts or textiles. They were about making community. As you sat next to your neighbors, hands busy with clay or thread, you shared stories, techniques, and a sense of purpose. The crafts were a physical manifestation of the invisible bonds that held your society together, a testament to the human need for connection and cooperation. And let's not forget the environmental factor. The materials for pottery and textiles didn't just fall from the sky. Clay had to be dug from the earth, fibers grown and harvested. Every part and tunic represented a direct relationship with the land, a reminder of the delicate balance between taking from nature and giving back. This wasn't just sustainable living, it was the only way to live. So, as the afternoon shadows stretch across the landscape, consider the manifold skills of your Neolithic ancestors. They weren't just farmers, they were artisans, traders, and social architects. Their world was one of constant innovation and adaptation, where the only constants were change and the relentless drive to survive. Each part, each woven thread tells a story of resilience, creativity, and the unyielding human spirit. As the sun begins its descent, casting a golden glow over the land, you realize that your day is far from over. There's still work to be done, skills to hone, and a community to sustain with your crafts. Every piece you create is a testament to your ingenuity, a small yet vital part of a much larger narrative. And while the work is hard, there's an undeniable pride in knowing that you're not just surviving, you're thriving, one crafted part and woven thread at a time. As the sun dips beneath the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, your Neolithic day slows down to the rhythm of crackling hearth fires. This is the moment when the world pauses and your community gathers around the communal blaze. It's time to swap stories, a tradition as old as the dirt under your feet. This isn't just casual chit-chat, mind you. It's the Neolithic version of Netflix binging. You're tuning into tales that shape your world, stories passed down through the generations like treasured heirlooms. Tonight, the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, mingling with the aroma of whatever's left from dinner, a hearty stew, or maybe some roasted roots. As you settle in, the elder of your tribe begins recounting the epic of a great hunt, or perhaps the tale of how your people first settled in this very spot. These stories aren't just entertainment, they are the oral history of your people, a way to reinforce the values and knowledge that keep your community bound together like the fibers of a well-woven textile. But let's not romanticize this too much. Sure, storytelling by the fire sounds cozy, but it's also a strategic tool in the grand game of social dynamics. These narratives reinforce the pecking order, subtly reminding everyone of the elder's authority and the collective wisdom that guides your tribe. It's like a board meeting, except the PowerPoint presentation is a gripping tale of valor and survival. And just like any good meeting, there's always someone nodding off in the back, a universal constant that transcends time. So, what's the broader significance of these fireside gatherings? Well, they're laying the groundwork for something monumental, a shift from small, egalitarian bands to more complex social structures. As communities grow, so too does the need for organization and hierarchy. In this Neolithic world, the seeds of leadership and governance are being planted, one story at a time. You see, the larger your group, the more you need someone to manage disputes, allocate resources, and lead hunts or agricultural efforts, into the early iterations of social hierarchy, where leadership might be based on age, skill, or sheer charisma. It's a bit like reality TV, where the most popular or competent contestant gets to be chief for the season. Emerging hierarchies also mean emerging tensions. As roles become more defined, so do the lines of power and influence. The chief or elder isn't just a figurehead. They're a pivotal player in the survival of the group, responsible for making decisions that could mean the difference between feast and famine. But power, as they say, is a double-edged stone tool. It's a slippery slope from respected leader to domineering despot, and the fireside stories often reflect this delicate balance. They serve as both a reminder of past glories and a cautionary tale against the excesses of power. A little bit of drama, a little bit of intrigue, just enough to keep everyone on their toes. These gatherings also symbolize a transition to a more sedentary lifestyle, one where the boundaries of your world are defined not just by the horizon, but by the community you've built. It's a shift from the nomadic life of hunter-gatherers to the rooted existence of farmers and craftsmen. This change is as much psychological as it is practical. You're no longer just surviving the elements. You're beginning to shape the world around you, planting the seeds, literally and metaphorically, for future civilizations. Now, let's tackle the myth of the Neolithic utopia. The romantic image of peaceful villages nestled in idyllic landscapes is just that, a romantic image, half-baked and sugar-coated. The reality is far more complex, and dare I say, gritty. Yes, the Neolithic era laid the foundations for modern society, but it also came with its fair share of growing pains. As communities expanded and hierarchies formed, so too did conflicts and challenges. Disputes over land, resources, and power became more common, requiring new forms of social control and organization. It's the dawn of bureaucracy, folks, and it's as inevitable as a Monday morning. Economically, these activities are setting the stage for trade networks that would eventually span continents. Simple act of bartering a part for grain is a precursor to the bustling markets and trade empires of the future. Your little community, with its rustic charm and relentless work ethic, is unwittingly drafting the blueprint for global commerce. It's a reminder that even the most mundane tasks, like crafting a pot or weaving a cloth, are part of a grander narrative. Each activity is a cog in the machine of human progress, turning slowly but steadily towards complexity. As the fires burn low and the stories wind down, you can't help but reflect on the day's work. Every seed planted, every part crafted, every tale told is a thread in the tapestry of human history. It's easy to get lost in the romantic allure of the past, but it's equally important to recognize the grit and determination that fueled it. The Neolithic era may not have had Wi-Fi or weekends, but it had something perhaps more valuable, the relentless drive to adapt, innovate, and survive against all odds. In the flickering glow of the fire, it's clear that this era is far from a footnote in history. It's a pivotal chapter, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. The foundation laid here will support the weight of empires, the brilliance of art and science, and the complexities of modern life. So, as you settle in for the night, surrounded by the warmth of your community and the stories that define it, take a moment to appreciate the legacy you're part of, a legacy carved from the very earth you till, shaped by the hands of countless ancestors, and destined to endure through the ages. And there you have it, a day in the life of a Neolithic farmer. Not just a farmer, but a craftsman, a storyteller, and an architect of the future. While the sun sets on this day, it rises on a new understanding of the past, one where the romance of simplicity meets the reality of survival. In this intersection, we find the true heart of human history, a story of endless adaptation and the unyielding pursuit of a better life. Chandragupta I, no relation to the Mauryan emperor of similar name, wasn't just another guy with a fancy title and a knack for wearing crowns. Around 320 CE, he was playing chess on the grand board of Indian politics, where the stakes were high and the pieces were real people. This wasn't a game for the faint-hearted. The board was riddled with small kingdoms, each vying for a slice of the subcontinent pie. The Gupta Empire's story begins not with a bang, but with a strategic whisper, a marriage proposal. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh great, another royal wedding, let's clarify. This wasn't about just picking out the right shade of gold for the chariot or perfecting the art of the royal wave. It was a tactical maneuver that would make even the most seasoned diplomat nod in approval. Chandragupta I didn't just marry anyone. He married Kumaradvi, a princess from the Likavi tribe. You see, the Likavis were like that friend with amazing social connections. By tying the knot, Chandragupta wasn't just gaining a partner. He was getting a political ally, a foothold in the fertile Ganges basin, and a boost in legitimacy that would make any ancient influencer green with envy. This matrimony wasn't just about candlelit dinners and strolls by the Yamuna. It was a power move straight out of a political thriller. The Likavis, though not the Kardashians of ancient India, had considerable clout. They controlled a key region that linked trade routes and provided access to wealth and resources. Chandragupta, through what we can only assume was a rather charming proposal, managed to turn this union into the foundation of an empire. It's as if he was playing Monopoly and landed on Boardwalk without paying a dime, all because he married into it. When Chandragupta I took over, the Gupta kingdom was not the sprawling empire one might imagine. It was more like a promising startup, not a Silicon Valley tech giant. But unlike many startups that fizzle out, Chandragupta had a plan. He wasn't just sitting around waiting for things to happen. He was out there, expanding his territory and consolidating power with a mix of diplomacy and, let's be real, a bit of good old-fashioned conquest. So, what was the political landscape like during Chandragupta's rise? Think of it as a power keg ready to explode. The Indian subcontinent was a collection of small kingdoms and tribal territories, each with their own rulers who were as ambitious as they were numerous. Dynasties rose and fell with the speed of a Netflix pilot season. In this chaotic mix, alliances were crucial. You couldn't just have a strong army. You needed to know who to trust, who to bribe, and who to marry. Chandragupta's strategy was clear. Unite and strengthen through alliances. He knew that while swords and shields could win battles, marriages and treaties won wars. He expanded his influence not just through force, but through forging connections. This was a time when politics was as much about bloodlines as it was about battle lines. The Gupta's rise wasn't just a tale of military conquest. It was also a story of smart social networking. Move over LinkedIn, ancient India had a better system, and it involved more elephants. As this kingdom began its transformation into an empire, it did so with the subtlety of a well-played hand of poker. The Guptas slowly but steadily increased their territory, integrating various regions under their control. They became masters of the soft takeover, absorbing smaller realms with minimal fuss. You know, just a casual annexation here and there, nothing to see, just empire building in action. And let's not forget the economic aspect. The region's prosperity wasn't just built on marriage alliances and political savvy. Trade routes flourished under Gupta control, bringing wealth from all corners of the known world. We're talking spices, textiles, and the kind of bling that would have made even the Roman elite take notice. The Gupta administration knew the value of a good trade agreement, and they capitalized on it, turning their kingdom into an economic powerhouse. All this maneuvering paid off. By the time Chandragupta I laid down his metaphorical crown, the Gupta Empire was well on its way to becoming the legendary Golden Age of India. Sure, it wasn't all sunshine and peacocks. There were challenges, rebellions, and the constant threat of invasion. But the foundation was set, the pieces were in place, and the game was afoot. In hindsight, Chandragupta I's rise wasn't just about building an empire. It was about crafting a legacy, one that balanced the intricate dance of diplomacy with the brute force of expansion. Behind every successful emperor was a strategy that blended the finesse of royal matchmaking with the gritty reality of empire building. As the Gupta Empire began to shine, it was clear that Chandragupta I had played his hand well, leaving a legacy that would be felt long after the last dance at his proverbial royal wedding. And so, with Chandragupta I's legacy firmly in place, the Gupta Empire was poised to become the Silicon Valley of the ancient world, minus the tech bros and overpriced lattes. How did they pull it off, you ask? Well, let's dive into the economic wizardry that transformed this empire into a juggernaut that could rival even the most bustling of ancient trading hubs. First off, let's talk about trade networks. The Guptas weren't just sitting around hoping their empire would grow. They were busy building connections that would make even LinkedIn jealous. Picture this. The Silk Road wasn't just a single road, but a complex web of trade routes stretching over 4,000 miles, connecting the east to the west. The Gupta Empire was strategically located to tap into this network, acting like a high-speed Wi-Fi router in the ancient world, facilitating the exchange of goods, culture, and ideas. The Guptas understood that trade was their golden ticket. The merchants weren't just hawking goods locally. They were peddling wares from China to the Mediterranean. We're talking about luxurious silk, aromatic spices, and the kind of jewelry that could make a pharaoh blush. It's said that the Roman elite were so fond of Indian goods that they practically bled gold into India's coffers, importing everything from pearls to pepper. But the Guptas didn't just rely on foreign trade. Domestically, they developed a robust network of roads that could rival Roman engineering. These weren't your average dirt paths. These were highways of commerce, equipped with rest houses and markers, ensuring that goods flowed smoothly across the empire. Think of it as the ancient version of FedEx, minus the tracking numbers and customer service woes. Now, let's not forget the monetary policies that kept this economic engine humming. The Guptas understood that a stable currency was the backbone of their economy. So, they decided to standardize coinage, creating a system that was both reliable and aesthetically pleasing. Their gold dinars were the Bitcoin of ancient India, but with a lot less volatility and a whole lot more bling. These coins were not only a medium of exchange, but also a symbol of the empire's wealth and stability. And here's the kicker. While other empires were busy debasing their currency, looking at you, late Roman Empire, the Guptas maintained the purity of their gold coins. This wasn't just good financial planning. It was a masterstroke of economic strategy. By ensuring their currency retained its value, they encouraged trade and investment, making the Gupta Empire the go-to market for merchants near and far. But behind the glimmering facade of prosperity, there were the less glamorous realities of maintaining an economic powerhouse. Taxation was the lifeblood of the empire, funding everything from infrastructure to military campaigns. The Gupta administration was adept at levying taxes without causing too much unrest. They used a system that was as sophisticated as it was efficient, with taxes collected in both cash and kind. Sure, nobody likes paying taxes, but when the roads are smooth and the economy is booming, even the grumbles of the taxpayer are softened, at least a little. Of course, with great wealth came great temptation. Corruption wasn't an unknown phenomenon, and while the Guptas managed to keep things relatively clean, there were always those looking to line their pockets. It's a tale as old as time. Where there's money, there are those looking to exploit it. But despite these challenges, the Gupta Empire's economic policies laid the groundwork for a period of unprecedented prosperity. In this era, being an economic powerhouse meant more than just having a fat treasury. It was about creating systems that ensured long-term stability and growth. The Guptas built an empire that not only survived, but thrived in the interconnected world of ancient trade. They were the original globalization pioneers, proving that with the right mix of strategy and resources, you could turn a kingdom into an empire. As we continue to unravel the layers of the Gupta Empire, it's clear that their story is one of both legend and reality. It's a testament to what can be achieved when ambition meets opportunity, and how, even in ancient times, the principles of economics and trade could shape the destiny of a civilization. Stay tuned, because the ride through Gupta history is far from over. Now, as we peel back the layers of the Gupta Empire's story, it's time to dive into what made this period shine brighter than a gold-dipped peacock, the cultural and intellectual explosion. Often dubbed the Golden Age of India, this era was not just about glittery crowns and flowing silks. It was a time when the human mind was the real crown jewel, sparking innovations in science, mathematics, and the arts that would shape the world for centuries. Let's start with a little number that changed everything: 0. Before you roll your eyes and think, great, math class again. Consider this. 0 is the unsung hero of the numerical world. It's the difference between having one elephant and none, and it was the Gupta mathematicians who first gave this concept a seat at the table. Around the 5th century CE, Indian scholars like Aryabhata were not just tinkering with numbers. They were revolutionizing the very way we count and calculate. Aryabhata himself was a bit of a mathematical rock star, crafting treatises that laid out the principles of arithmetic, algebra, and trigonometry. His work, the Aryabhatiya, was like the ancient world's version of a math textbook, but with fewer doodles in the margins. Aryabhata wasn't just counting coconuts, though. He was also peering into the cosmos, using his keen intellect to chart the movements of the planets and stars. You might say he was the Neil deGrasse Tyson of his time, sans the Twitter account. He calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, and even proposed that the Earth rotated on its axis, a theory that was centuries ahead of its time. So, while your average ancient philosopher was pondering the meaning of life, Aryabhata was busy measuring its dimensions. And speaking of stars, let's not forget Varahamihira, another giant in the Gupta scientific community, who took astrology and astronomy to new heights. His Brihat Samhita was an encyclopedia of knowledge, covering everything from planetary movements to weather forecasting. Yep, ancient India had its own version of the Weather Channel, minus the green screen. Varahamihira's work laid the groundwork for future astronomers and showed that the Gupta era wasn't just about looking inward with philosophy, but also looking outward to the vast unknowns. Now, let's shift gears from the stars to the stage. The arts flourished under the Gupta reign, with literature and drama experiencing a renaissance of sorts. Enter Kalidasa, the Shakespeare of ancient India, whose works continue to be celebrated for their lyrical beauty and emotional depth. His play, Shakuntala, was a blockbuster hit, capturing the hearts of audiences with its tale of love, loss, and reconciliation. Kalidasa wasn't just putting pen to palm leaf. He was crafting stories that resonated across cultures and eras. His poetry wasn't just about pretty words. It was a reflection of a society that valued creativity and expression. But let's debunk a myth here. Ancient cultures weren't just about reciting poetry under banyan trees or gazing at the stars. The Gupta period was also a time of intense scientific inquiry and technological advancement. Metallurgy, for instance, saw significant advancements with the creation of the Iron Pillar of Delhi, a marvel that has resisted rust for over 600 years. This is no small feat, considering most of us can't keep our cars from rusting over a few winters. The pillar stands as a testament to the Guptas' metallurgical prowess and their ability to blend art with engineering. And then there were the medical advancements. Ancient India was not just about spiritual healing and herbal remedies. Physicians like Sushruta were performing surgeries that would make even modern surgeons sit up and take notice. His comprehensive medical treatise, the Sushruta Samhita, detailed surgical techniques, including rhinoplasty, centuries before it became a popular cosmetic procedure. So, next time you hear someone wax poetic about ancient wisdom, remember it wasn't just about arm chants and meditation. It was about scalpels and sutures, too. The Gupta era was a time when the boundaries of human knowledge were being pushed in every direction. The intellectual climate was one of exploration and innovation, driven by a society that valued education and inquiry. Universities like Nalanda became centers of learning, attracting students from far and wide who came seeking knowledge in everything from logic to linguistics. It was the Ivy League of its day, a place where ideas flowed as freely as the Ganges. But let's not romanticize it too much. Despite the intellectual and cultural achievements, the Gupta Empire, like any other, had its share of social stratifications and inequalities. The caste system was firmly entrenched, and while the Brahmins were busy penning poetry and pondering philosophy, the lower castes were often stuck with the less glamorous tasks of daily life. It's a stark reminder that even in the midst of a golden age, not everyone was basking in the glow. As we continue to unravel the Gupta Empire's legacy, it's clear that this period was a dance between the sublime and the practical, the artistic and the scientific. The Guptas weren't just building an empire of land. They were crafting an empire of ideas, one that would resonate through the ages. So, as we inch closer to the next chapter of this tale, remember that the golden age of India was as much about the mind as it was about might. Stay tuned, because the Gupta story has more twists, turns, and tales of triumph waiting in the wings. As we wade deeper into the narrative tapestry of the Gupta Empire, it's time to lift the veil on what daily life was really like for its inhabitants. Spoiler alert, it wasn't all philosophers perched under banyan trees and astronomers mapping the stars. Beneath the glittering surface of the so-called Golden Age lay a society as complex as a barleywood plotline, complete with its own share of drama, intrigue, and a dash of inequality. First on the stage, let's talk about the caste system. Now, if you think today's social hierarchies can be complicated, try wrapping your head around ancient India's caste dynamics. The official term was Varna, a fancy way of saying social class, and it wasn't just a suggestion, it was the rulebook. Picture a grand, multi-tiered wedding cake, but instead of icing and layers, you had Brahmins, priests and scholars, Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers, Vaishyas, merchants and traders, and Shudras, laborers and service providers. And let's not forget the so-called untouchables, who weren't even on the cake, more like crumbs brushed aside. This wasn't just a social construct. It was a rigid framework that affected everything from your job prospects to your dinner company. Your caste dictated who you could marry, what you could eat, and even where you could live. It was like living your entire life according to a script written by someone else, with about as much room for improvisation as a Shakespearean tragedy. But hold on a second. Before we clutch our pearls and wag our fingers, let's acknowledge why this system had its appeal. It provided order and stability in a society that, without modern conveniences like LinkedIn or Google Maps, needed some way to organize itself. The system ensured that everyone had a role to play, and in a world where survival often depended on cooperation, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. But let's not romanticize it either. For many, it was less orderly society and more life sentence. So, what about social mobility? Well, let's just say it was about as likely as spotting a unicorn in your backyard. The caste system was notoriously sticky. People were mostly born into a caste and stayed there, come what may. Sure, there were the occasional rags-to-riches stories, but they were about as common as a solar eclipse. For the average individual, the caste system was more of a ladder with missing rungs than a staircase to success. Now let's chat about the role of women in the Gupta Empire. The romanticized vision often paints them as graceful figures draped in silks, serenely engaging in art and literature. The reality, however, was a bit more nuanced. Women had certain rights, like owning property and receiving education, but their roles were primarily defined by their relationships: daughter, wife, mother. The Manusmriti, a text from this era, dictated that a woman's role was to be under the protection of her father, husband, or son at any given time. Independence was a luxury few could afford. That said, women weren't entirely sidelined. Some, especially those of higher status, wielded significant influence behind the scenes. They could be patrons of the arts, and in rare cases, like that of Prabhavarigupta, they even ruled, albeit often as regents for their sons. But for the average woman, life was often a balancing act of navigating societal expectations and personal aspirations. The Gupta Empire also had its own version of social networking, minus the Facebook friend requests. Instead, they had the Varna system and elaborate kinship networks. Marriages were key strategic moves, not unlike drafting a player into a sports team. Families aimed to marry off their daughters into higher status households, a practice that was less about romantic love and more about social climbing. It was a society where alliances were everything, and the right marriage could elevate a family standing overnight. Community life was vibrant but structured. The village was the nucleus of social life, with local assemblies called sabhas dealing with everything from legal disputes to festival planning. These assemblies were like the ancient version of town hall meetings, where elders and influential members of the community would gather to weigh in on issues. It's a charming idea, but let's not pretend it was all democratic. Influence often boiled down to who you knew and how much land you owned. Religion, too, played a significant role in everyday life, with Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism coexisting, though not always peacefully. Temples were more than just places of worship. They were community centers, economic hubs, and sometimes political arenas. The construction of grand temples wasn't just an act of piety, but a statement of power and prestige. Think of it as a divine competition to see who could build the most impressive house for the gods. But let's not sugarcoat it. Behind the spirituality was a robust economy of temple donations and pilgrimages, which often doubled as opportunities for trade and cultural exchange. It was a symbiotic relationship where faith and finance walked hand in hand, sometimes tripping over each other's toes. Now, you might be wondering about the idyllic portrayals of Gupta society, the ones with serene landscapes and contented citizens. Well, those are about as reliable as a politician's promise. While the empire did experience peace and prosperity, it wasn't all lotus flowers and lullabies. The reality was grittier, with occasional famines, local skirmishes, and the ever-present shadow of disease. Life expectancy wasn't exactly stellar, hovering around 25 to 35 years, depending on your caste and location. In essence, the Gupta Empire was a tapestry woven with both gold and grit. It was a time of great achievements and stark inequalities, of cultural brilliance and rigid social structures. The period is often remembered for its remarkable advancements, but it's crucial to remember that not everyone shared equally in its golden glow. As we leave this segment, clutching our newfound understanding of Gupta society, let's keep in mind that the story isn't over. The empire's legacy is one of both triumph and turmoil, and there's plenty more to uncover. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the intricate web of history, where the past is never quite as simple as it seems. But as the curtain falls on the glittering stage of the Gupta Empire, the spotlight shifts to the shadows gathering at its edges. It's a classic tale. When you're at the top, there's nowhere to go but down, and the Guptas were no exception. Their empire, once the toast of ancient India, began to fray at the seams, unraveling in a series of events that could fill a history book or a Shakespearean tragedy. Let's start with the internal strife, the kind that turns family dinners into battlefields. The Gupta dynasty, like many royal families, found itself tangled in a web of succession disputes. Remember the first rule of empire building: never underestimate the power of a good family feud to bring down an entire civilization. As emperors passed and crowns changed hands, the clarity of succession blurred. Brothers, uncles, and cousins all eyed the throne like it was the last seat at the dinner table during the holidays. This internal bickering wasn't just a royal headache, it was a strategic disaster. It weakened the central authority and left the empire vulnerable to external threats. Speaking of which, let's talk about the invaders, those pesky party crashers who show up just when things are getting cozy. The Huna people, known in the West as the Huns, decided it was time to pay a visit. These were not the kind of guests who brought wine and compliments. Instead, they stormed into the northwest of the Gupta Empire in the 5th century CE with the kind of force that made the locals seriously consider a change of address. Under the leadership of Toramana and later his son Mihirakula, the Hunas inflicted significant damage. They weren't just content with raiding and pillaging. They wanted a slice of the Gupta pie, and they were willing to fight for it. The Gupta military, once a force to be reckoned with, found itself stretched thin. Maintaining a vast empire is like juggling flaming swords, impressive until you drop one. The resources that once flowed freely to the military were now diverted to patch up the cracks in the empire's infrastructure. The Guptas had to learn the hard way that an overstretched army is about as effective as a butter knife in a sword fight. And when your enemy is riding in with the ferocity of a thunderstorm, that's not a good position to be in. Economically, the Gupta Empire was also taking hits left and right. Their trade networks, once bustling highways of commerce, began to dwindle. The Silk Road wasn't just a road, it was a lifeline. And when that lifeline started fraying due to external pressures and internal mismanagement, the empire felt the pinch. Trade routes were disrupted, not just by invasions, but by the gradual decline in central authority. The once flourishing markets started to dry up like a well in a desert, and the coffers of the empire began to echo with the sound of emptiness. Taxation, which had been a well-oiled machine, turned into a source of discontent. With fewer goods flowing in and out, the tax base shrunk, putting more pressure on the peasantry, who were already feeling the squeeze. This wasn't just an economic problem, it was a social powder keg. When the people at the bottom start feeling the heat, it's only a matter of time before that discontent bubbles over. The empire's ability to maintain roads, public works, and military outposts dwindled, leading to even more decay. And then there were the environmental factors. The Gupta Empire, like all great civilizations, was at the mercy of the elements. Changes in climate and agricultural productivity didn't help their cause. When the monsoons failed or the rivers flooded, it was more than just an inconvenience. It was a potential catastrophe. Agriculture was the backbone of their economy, and when that backbone started to bend, the entire empire risked snapping. As all these elements converged, the once golden empire began to tarnish. By the mid-6th century, the Gupta Empire was a shadow of its former self, fragmented and weakened. The final blow came not with a bang, but with a whimper, as regional governors and local rulers seized the opportunity to assert their independence. They weren't about to let a faltering central government dictate their actions. What had once been a unified empire crumbled into a patchwork of smaller kingdoms, each vying for power and territory. Yet, amidst the wreckage, the Gupta legacy persisted. If history teaches us anything, it's that the end of an empire doesn't mean the end of its influence. The Gupta Empire left behind a cultural and intellectual legacy that continued to shape the Indian subcontinent and beyond. Their advancements in mathematics, science, and the arts didn't just vanish into the ether. They laid the groundwork for future generations. The concept of zero, the intricate sculptures and temples, and the literary works of Kalidasa and his ilk remained as testaments to a bygone era of enlightenment. The Gupta story is more than a rise and fall narrative. It's a reminder of the cyclical nature of history. Empires come and go, each with its own blend of triumph and tragedy. The Guptas showed us that even the mightiest can falter if they lose sight of the foundations that hold them together. Internal unity, economic stability, and effective leadership aren't just buzzwords. They're survival tactics. And when these elements slip through the cracks, even the glittering heights of a golden age can come crashing down. So, what's the takeaway from this ancient drama? Perhaps it's the understanding that no empire, no matter how grand, is invincible. The Gupta Empire's story is a cautionary tale, but also an inspiring one. It teaches us that while the structures of power may crumble, the ideas and innovations they fostered can endure, influencing societies in ways the original architects could never have imagined. As we wrap up this saga, let's carry forward the lessons of the Guptas. They remind us that while we might build magnificent civilizations, it's the human stories of ambition, innovation, and resilience that truly stand the test of time. And in a world that often feels just as chaotic and unpredictable as ancient India, there's comfort in knowing that history is a tapestry woven from both triumph and turmoil, each thread telling its own story in the grand narrative of human endeavor. In the tangled web of 19th century European aristocracy, Empress Elisabeth of Austria, or Sisi as she preferred, stands out like a velvet dress in a room full of tweed suits. Born on Christmas Eve in 1837, Sisi entered the world in Munich, Bavaria, and if the stars were any indicator, her life was destined to be anything but ordinary. Her family, the Wittelsbachs, were a lively bunch, known for their eccentricities and penchant for drama. You could say they put the fun in dysfunctional long before the Kardashians were a twinkle in reality TV's eye. Sisi was the fourth of 10 children, which meant she was comfortably nestled in the middle of the family chaos. Her childhood was a mix of idyllic freedom and periodic bouts of aristocratic responsibility. The Wittelsbachs had a summer residence, Parsenhofen Castle, where Sisi spent her days riding horses and roaming the countryside. Think of it as the 19th century version of letting your kids loose at a petting zoo, minus the safety regulations. Her mother, Ludovica, was a Bavarian duchess who, like most mothers, had aspirations for her children that reached far beyond their carefree days by the lake. The real plot twist in Sisi's life came when her cousin, Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria, was in need of a bride. Initially, the plan was for Franz Joseph to marry Sisi's older sister, Helene, who was deemed more suitable for royal life. But in a turn of events that would make any rom-com screenwriter proud, Franz Joseph laid eyes on the 15-year-old Sisi and was instantly smitten. Helene, bless her heart, was left with a royal engagement that vanished faster than a Snapchat message. Franz Joseph was the Emperor of Austria, a nation then comprised of various regions and ethnicities, struggling to find a unifying identity. Franz Joseph's mother, Archduchess Sophie, was the driving force behind the throne and was infamous for her iron will and high expectations. She saw Sisi as an unpredictable choice, akin to picking a wild card for a high-stakes poker game. Nevertheless, Franz Joseph was adamant, and when you're the emperor, you tend to get your way. So, in 1854, just months after she turned 60, Sisi found herself at the center of a grand wedding ceremony in Vienna. The event itself was a spectacle of opulence, costing more than a small country's GDP at the time. But for Sisi, it marked the beginning of a life under the microscope. Once in Vienna, Sisi's free spirit clashed spectacularly with the rigid protocols of the Habsburg court. The court was a place where spontaneity went to die, a bastion of tradition where the only thing more stifling than the rules were the corsets. Sisi, who was used to riding horses and hiking in the Bavarian Alps, found herself in a world where even her daily schedule was mapped out with military precision. The palace was a gilded cage, and Sisi was its reluctant songbird. Her new mother-in-law, Archduchess Sophie, kept a watchful eye on her every move, determined to mold Sisi into the perfect empress. This included everything from dictating her wardrobe to scrutinizing her social interactions. It was enough to drive anyone mad, and Sisi, who valued her independence above all else, found herself struggling to adapt. She famously said, "I have come to the conclusion that it would be better for the peace of my soul if I had never married." Not exactly a glowing endorsement of the marital bliss she was supposed to be promoting. Despite the grandeur of her new role, Sisi was often plagued by homesickness and a sense of isolation. She missed the freedom of her childhood and the warmth of her family. The Viennese court judged her for her modern ideas and unconventional behavior, viewing her as an outsider who didn't quite fit the mold. Sisi's refusal to conform to the court's expectations made her a subject of gossip and speculation, adding to her growing list of frustrations. But Sisi wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was a woman of complexity and strength. She began to exert her influence in subtle ways, such as advocating for the Hungarian people who were under Austrian rule. Her interest in Hungary grew over the years and would let her play a significant role in her legacy. For now, though, she was a young empress navigating a world that often felt entirely foreign to her. Her struggles with mental health, exacerbated by the pressures of court life and her own perfectionism, were something she battled privately, reflecting a broader issue of how mental health was viewed in the 19th century. It's easy to romanticize Sisi's life with its palaces and titles, but the reality was far more complex and at times deeply painful. Yet, through it all, Sisi maintained a sense of self that defied the conventions of her time, a testament to her unyielding spirit. So there she was, a Bavarian duchess turned Austrian empress, caught in the crosshairs of tradition and modernity. Her life was a journey of contradictions, a blend of fairy tale and tragedy that continues to captivate us today. Sisi may have been forced into a role she never sought, but she carved out a legacy that was entirely her own, one that continues to fascinate and inspire. And as we delve deeper into her story, it's clear that the legend of Sisi is as much about enduring spirit as it is about the tiaras and titles. And so, we find Sisi, the reluctant empress, navigating the treacherous terrain of the Austrian court, a world where spontaneity was about as welcome as a snowstorm in July. It's like being a fish out of water, only the water is champagne, and the fish is expected to smile while drowning. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Sisi wasn't one to back down from a challenge, even if that challenge came with a crown and a heap of expectations. Now, if you thought modern celebrity culture was obsessed with appearance, you haven't met Sisi. This woman was the 19th century poster child for extreme beauty regimens, making today's Instagram influencers look like amateurs. Her daily routine was a marathon of grooming that would make even the most dedicated health guru break a sweat. We're talking about hours, yes, hours, of beauty rituals. Her hair alone, which reached floor-length Rapunzel status, required a full day of attention each week. It was washed with a concoction of eggs and cognac, which sounds more like a failed omelette recipe than a hair treatment. But hair care was just the tip of the iceberg. Sisi was fanatical about maintaining her waistline, which she kept at a waspish 19.5 inches. To achieve this, she embarked on a diet that could best be described as a medieval form of intermittent fasting. She was known to subsist on a broth of meat juice, and in moments of indulgence, a slice of orange. Her exercise routine was equally intense, involving hours of horseback riding and gymnastics. You'd think she was training for the Olympics instead of attending royal galas. The woman was relentless in her pursuit of beauty, a fact that the Viennese court viewed with a mixture of awe and skepticism. Sisi's obsession with her appearance wasn't just vanity, it was her armor. In a court that scrutinized her every move, beauty became her silent rebellion. By controlling her image, she carved out a space of autonomy in a world where her choices were often dictated by others. But let's not romanticize it too much. This was also a reflection of the pressures women faced, and still face, to conform to idealized standards. Sisi was both a product of her time and a rebel against it. The Austrian court, for its part, wasn't quite sure what to make of Sisi's beauty obsession. On one hand, she was the jewel in the imperial crown, admired by subjects and foreign dignitaries alike. On the other hand, her reluctance to play the part of the demure, dutiful empress was a source of endless frustration for those who believed in tradition above all else. Archduchess Sophie, ever the dutiful mother-in-law, saw Sisi's behavior as a personal affront. She wanted a compliant empress, not a fashion icon with a penchant for Hungarian politics. Ah yes, Hungary, the proverbial thorn in the side of the Austrian Empire. While the empire struggled to maintain control over its diverse territories, Sisi found herself drawn to the Hungarian cause. She admired their fiercely independent spirit, a sentiment that no doubt resonated with her own rebellious nature. Her support for Hungary wasn't just a political statement, it was a personal affinity that would later become a cornerstone of her legacy. But in these early years, it was merely another point of contention with the court. Despite the friction, Sisi's beauty and charisma made her an enduring figure of fascination. She was the subject of countless rumors and myths, a 19th century tabloid darling, if you will. Her life was a blend of reality and legend, each feeding into the other in a way that continues to captivate us even today. But let's not kid ourselves. Behind the glamour and the gossip was a woman grappling with her own demons. Her struggles with mental health were as real as the tiaras she wore, a stark reminder that even the most gilded lives can be fraught with pain. Sisi's battles with the Austrian court were emblematic of a larger struggle, one that pitted individuality against conformity, modernity against tradition. She was a woman ahead of her time, caught in a world that often felt centuries behind. In many ways, her story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of idealizing the past. Yes, there were balls and banquets, but there were also isolation and scrutiny. Sisi's life was as much a prison as it was a palace, a reality that is often glossed over in the fairy tale retellings. As we continue to unravel the layers of Sisi's life, one thing becomes clear. Her legacy is not just about the empress she was, but the woman she refused to become. Her defiance, her struggles, and yes, even her beauty regimen are all part of a story that is as complex as it is compelling. And while we may never fully untangle the myths from the reality, one thing is certain. Sisi's story is far from over. So stay tuned, because the legend of Empress Elisabeth is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. And as the legend of Empress Elisabeth unfolds, we find her doing what any self-respecting 19th century royal would when faced with insurmountable pressure. She harped on the 1800s version of a jet and got the heck out of Dodge. Think of it as a royal gap year, only instead of backpacking through Europe, she was escaping the prying eyes of the Viennese court by gallivanting around places like Corfu and Madeira. These weren't just vacation spots. They were her sanctuaries, far removed from the suffocating protocols of court life. Corfu, with its azure waters and olive groves, became one of Sisi's favorite hideaways. Here, she wasn't Empress Elisabeth, she was just Sisi, a woman on a quest for peace and maybe a decent tan. In 1861, she even commissioned the construction of the Achillean Palace, a lavish homage to Greek mythology and a reflection of her fascination with the legendary hero Achilles. The palace was a cool 50 million drachmas, a sum that could make even a billionaire blink. Yet, in this marble sanctuary, she found a semblance of the freedom she craved. Walking its halls, she could almost pretend the weight of the empire wasn't on her shoulders. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just a leisurely escape. Sisi's travels were as much about avoiding the court as they were about finding herself. She was a royal in exile by choice, a nomad in a world that demanded roots. Her wanderlust was more than a desire to see new places. It was a form of rebellion against the life she never asked for but couldn't escape. In Madeira, she embraced the island's isolated beauty, finding solace in its rugged landscapes, far from the prying eyes and wagging tongues of Vienna. While the courtiers gossiped about her absences, Sisi was doing something far more important. She was listening, learning, and thinking. Her journeys were also political reconnaissance missions, helping her understand the empire beyond the gilded walls of the Hofburg Palace. It was in these travels that her fascination with Hungarian politics deepened. Hungary, the empire's rebellious child, was a nation after her own heart, craving autonomy from Austrian rule. This brings us to Count Gyula Andrassy, a man whose very name sounds like it belongs in a James Bond film. Andrassy was the charismatic Hungarian statesman who became Sisi's confidant, and some might say, her political muse. Their friendship was the stuff of legend, filled with whispered conversations and shared aspirations for a Hungary that could stand on its own. Andrassy, who had been exiled after the Hungarian Revolution of 1848, returned to the political scene with a vengeance, and Sisi was more than happy to be his ally. Their relationship fueled rumors, of course, because what else would people talk about at the imperial court? But beyond the scandalous whispers, there was a genuine meeting of minds. Sisi's support for the Hungarian cause wasn't just a personal fancy. It was a strategic move that would have monumental consequences. She saw in Hungary the same independent spirit she cherished within herself, and she was determined to see it flourish. Enter the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867, a political masterstroke that effectively created the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. This wasn't just some backroom deal. It was a seismic shift in European politics, one that redefined the balance of power within the empire. And while Franz Joseph was the face of the agreement, Sisi was its heart. Her rapport with the Hungarian people and her influence over Andrassy were instrumental in its success. She wasn't just a pretty face in a corset. She was a political player, weaving her way through a labyrinth of alliances and agendas. The compromise was a bit of a high-wire act, balancing the demands of the Hungarian nobility with the realities of the Austrian court. It granted Hungary its own parliament and greater autonomy, while Franz Joseph remained the sovereign ruler. In practical terms, this meant economic concessions, military compromises, and a delicate dance of diplomacy. The empire's finances were a mess, with debts mounting like unpaid parking tickets. The dual monarchy was a way to keep the peace, at least temporarily, while addressing Hungary's demands for more self-governance. For Sisi, this was a personal victory, a testament to her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of imperial politics. She was no longer just a reluctant empress, but a catalyst for change, a force to be reckoned with in a world dominated by men in frock coats and top hats. But as with all things in Sisi's life, this triumph came with its own set of challenges. The compromise was a band-aid on a bullet wound, a temporary solution to a long-standing problem, and Sisi knew it. Yet, in those heady days of 1867, there was a sense of hope in the air, a belief that the empire might just find a way to coexist with its diverse peoples. Sisi's role in this was as complex as it was indispensable. She was a woman caught between two worlds, using her influence to bridge the gap between Austria and Hungary. Her friendship with Andrassy was a testament to what could be achieved when personal alliances met political necessity. But let's not forget, this was still the 19th century, and Sisi was still a woman in a man's world. Her contributions were often overshadowed by the more tangible accomplishments of her male counterparts. Yet, her impact was undeniable, a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes come not from legislation, but from the hearts and minds of the people involved. As Sisi traveled between her beloved hideaways and the political hotspots of Europe, she became a symbol of what the empire could aspire to be, a union not just of territories, but of ideas and ideals. Her life was a testament to the power of personal agency, a reminder that even in a world of rigid hierarchies, a determined individual could make a difference. So, as the waves of the Adriatic lapped at the shores of Corfu and the Madeira breeze whispered through the trees, Sisi continued her journey, both literal and metaphorical. Her story was far from over, and the pages yet to be written promised drama, intrigue, and perhaps even a touch of redemption. Stay tuned, because the legend of Empress Elisabeth is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. So as Sisi continued her literal and metaphorical journey, the winds of change brought more than just whispers of political intrigue. They ushered in a tempest of personal tragedy. Enter the Neolithic incident of 1889, a scandal so juicy it could make even the most seasoned tabloid writer salivate. This was the kind of drama that would earn its own Netflix series today, complete with a moody soundtrack and lingering close-ups. Now, let's set the stage. Crown Prince Rudolf, Sisi's only son and heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was a dashing figure with a tragic bent. Think of him as the James Dean of the Habsburg dynasty, complete with brooding looks and a penchant for rebellion. Rudolf was caught in the same vice grip of expectation that plagued his mother, and like her, he sought solace in places the court deemed inappropriate. His liberal ideas and strained marriage to Princess Stephanie of Belgium only added fuel to the fire. But here's where the plot thickens. On January 30, 1889, Rudolf and his 17-year-old lover, Baroness Mary Wetzera, were found dead at Neolithic, his hunting lodge. Officially, it was ruled a murder-suicide with Rudolf pulling the trigger. But conspiracy theories abounded, ranging from political assassinations to secret societies. Because let's face it, nothing spices up history like a good cloak and dagger tale. While Franz Joseph was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered succession plan, Sisi's world crumbled around her. The death of her son was a seismic shock, a personal blow that left her reeling. Sisi's bond with Rudolf was complex, shaped by shared alienation from the court's suffocating protocols. His death only deepened her disillusionment with the imperial life she never truly embraced. It was a mother grieving the loss of her child, haunted by what-ifs and maybes, wrapped in a cloak of public scrutiny as dense as the fog over the Vienna woods. From this point, Sisi's wardrobe became as dark as her mood. She adopted a Sama uniform of black, a visual manifesto of her internal state. The Empress who once dazzled in silks and jewels now wore her grief like a second skin. In a world where appearance was everything, Sisi's choice was a defiant statement, a refusal to play the part of the merry monarch's consort. It was as if she was saying, "I'm not here to smile and wave. I'm here to mourn and remember." Her reclusiveness deepened, and she became a ghostly figure at court, more likely to be found wandering the halls of her palatial retreats than attending state functions. For Sisi, the court was a stage where the spotlight was unrelenting, and she was done performing. Instead, she sought refuge in her beloved Greece, where her Chilean palace stood as a monument to her yearning for freedom. But while Sisi sought solace abroad, the economic realities of the empire couldn't be ignored. Austria-Hungary was a patchwork quilt of ethnicities and tensions, all stitched together with frayed threads of compromise. The dual monarchy was a clever balancing act, but it was also a financial drain, with military expenditures and national debts spiraling faster than an out-of-control carousel. The empire needed stability, but its foundation was as shaky as a Viennese waltz on a rickety dance floor. Sisi's political influence waned as her personal tragedies mounted. She was no longer the vibrant force behind the Austro-Hungarian compromise, but a Sama figurehead, her power ebbing away like the tide. Yet, even in her retreat, she remained a symbol of what could have been, a reminder that behind the glittering veneer of empire lay a complex web of human emotion and ambition. But let's not romanticize her retreat into isolation. Sisi's withdrawal was both a personal choice and a societal commentary. In a world that demanded she play the role of the perfect empress, she chose to step back, to be an outsider looking in. It's a choice that resonates with anyone who's ever felt the weight of expectations and the desire to chart their own course, regardless of the consequences. As we unravel the myth of Sisi, it's clear that her story is a tapestry of contradictions. She was a woman who defied convention, yet was bound by it, a monarch who sought freedom within the confines of the crown. Her life was a testament to the power of personal agency and the price it demands. The legend of Sisi is not just about the glamorous empress, but the complex human being who wore the crown. And as we reach the closing chapters of her life, it's a story that continues to captivate, to challenge, and to inspire. So stay tuned, because the final act of Sisi's story promises more twists and turns than even history itself could have scripted. As we reach the closing chapters of Sisi's life, the stage is set for a finale that no playwright could have conjured. On September 10, 1898, in the picturesque city of Geneva, Sisi met her untimely end not in a grand palace or an opulent ballroom, but on a humble lakeside promenade. In a twist of fate that underscores the randomness of history, she was assassinated by an Italian anarchist named Luigi Lucchini. His weapon of choice, an ordinary file, the kind you might use to smooth the rough edges of a particularly unruly piece of wood. It was a grim reminder that in a world of grand empires and regal splendor, life is often dictated by the smallest, most unassuming details. Lucchini's motive was as blunt as his weapon. He wasn't driven by personal vendetta or political strategy. Rather, he saw Sisi as a symbol of the ruling elite he despised. For him, any aristocrat would do, and Sisi, with her penchant for anonymity and travel, just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's almost as if the universe itself conspired to underscore the fragility of life, juxtaposing the elegance of an empress with the crude finality of an anarchist's blow. For the public, Sisi's assassination was a shockwave that rippled across Europe. The Empress, who had spent much of her life evading the public eye, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight, albeit posthumously. Her death was a catalyst for a deluge of retrospection, a chance for the world to re-evaluate the enigma she had always been. The newspapers of the time were filled with eulogies that blurred the line between reality and myth, painting Sisi as both a tragic heroine and a misunderstood rebel. But let's not get swept away by the tide of romanticism. Sisi's life was no fairy tale, and her death was far from a noble sacrifice. She was a woman trapped by circumstance, a reluctant empress who spent her days oscillating between duty and desire. Her assassination was not the grand climax of a storied reign, but a stark punctuation mark on a life defined by contradictions. The irony is palpable. Here was a woman who craved anonymity, yet in death, she became a symbol of the very empire she had spent her life trying to escape. The aftermath of her assassination was a whirlwind of grief and reflection. Franz Joseph, the stoic emperor who had weathered revolutions and rebellions, was left to mourn the loss of his wife in a world that seemed increasingly out of his control. The empire itself was fraying at the edges, its patchwork nature more apparent with each passing year. In many ways, Sisi's death was a metaphor for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a beautiful facade masking internal turmoil and inevitable decline. As we peel back the layers of Sisi's legacy, it becomes clear that her life continues to captivate us, not just because of its glamour, but because of its enduring relevance. She was a woman who defied the conventions of her time, challenging the rigid structures that sought to define her. Her struggles with mental health, her battle for personal autonomy, and her refusal to be pigeonholed as a mere figurehead resonate with anyone who has ever felt the weight of expectations. Yet, for all her modern appeal, Sisi's story is also a cautionary tale about the dangers of romanticizing the past. The fairy tale Empress is a construct that glosses over the harsh realities of her life, reducing her to a caricature of beauty and tragedy. In truth, Sisi was a complex individual, shaped by the political and social currents of her time. Her life was not a series of picturesque tableaux, but a tapestry woven with threads of ambition, despair, and resilience. In popular culture, Sisi has been immortalized in films, books, and even musicals, each retelling adding another layer to her mythos. The 1955 film Sisi, starring Romy Schneider, became an international sensation, cementing her image as a romantic icon. But while the film captured the allure of imperial splendor, it glossed over the grit and complexity that defined Sisi's life. It's a reminder that history is often rewritten to suit the narrative of the moment, transforming flesh and blood figures into avatars of our collective imagination. Despite, or perhaps because of, these romanticized portrayals, Sisi's legacy endures as a testament to the enduring allure of royalty and the timeless struggle for identity. Her story is a poignant reflection on the human condition, highlighting the tension between personal desires and societal expectations. In the end, Sisi's life is a mirror, reflecting both the beauty and the absurdity of a world that remains captivated by crowns and titles. So, as we draw the curtain on Sisi's story, we are left with a legacy that is as multifaceted as the woman herself. Her life was a study in contrasts, a journey that took her from the pastoral idyll of Bavaria to the heart of an empire teetering on the brink of collapse. Sisi may have been an empress, but she was also a woman who dared to dream beyond the confines of her gilded cage. Her story is a reminder that history is not just about the grand narratives of nations and empires, but about the individuals who navigate its complexities. And as we bid farewell to Empress Elisabeth, it's worth pausing to reflect on the lessons her life offers. In a world where the past is often romanticized, Sisi's story serves as a poignant reminder of the power of personal agency and the enduring appeal of those who dare to defy convention. Her legacy is a call to see beyond the myths, to recognize the humanity behind the crown. It's a lesson that resonates today, inviting us to look past the surface and appreciate the rich tapestry of history in all its complexity. If you've ever wondered what it's like to grow up with parents who are both royalty and the original power couple, look no further than Catherine of Aragon. Born in 1485, Catherine was the youngest daughter of Ferdinand Roman II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. These two weren't just any monarchs, they were the Catholic monarchs, the folks who united Spain and decided that Christopher Columbus should take a little cruise westward. Talk about big shoes to fill. Catherine was raised in a world where her playdates included lessons in Latin, history, and religion. None of that finger-painting nonsense for her. She was groomed for greatness, with an education fit for a queen, literally. Her tutors drilled her in the arts, languages, and diplomacy. By age 3, she probably knew more about European politics than most adults today. Let's not even start on how many languages she spoke fluently. Hint, more than 2, which already puts most of us to shame. Now, you might think growing up in a royal household was all ballrooms and banquets, but Catherine's parents had bigger plans than just hosting lavish parties. Ferdinand and Isabella had their eyes set on the prize, marrying their daughter into the English royal family. Why? Because power, people, power. Marrying their kid off to a Tudor was like securing a golden ticket to political influence across Europe. Plus, it didn't hurt that the English had finally stopped fighting each other in the Wars of the Roses. Peacetime is prime time for making marital alliances, after all. Enter Prince Arthur, the eldest son of Henry Roman VII of England. He was the lucky lad chosen to be Catherine's future husband. The match was agreed upon when Catherine was just 3 years old, which might seem a tad premature, but hey, the early bird gets the diplomatic worm right. A few years later, in 1497, a marriage treaty was signed. Catherine was still playing with dolls, and she was already betrothed. That's Tudor efficiency for you. Catherine's journey to England was anything but a breezy royal road trip. In 1501, set off on what can only be described as the nightmare version of a student exchange program. She traveled over 700 miles from Spain to England, a journey that took several months. And let's not forget, this was the 16th century. There were no first-class cabins or in-flight movies, just a boat and probably a lot of seasickness. When she finally arrived in England, she was greeted by endless rain. Welcome to the UK, Catherine. Hope you like grey skies. At last, on November 14, 1501, Catherine married Arthur in a lavish ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral. The whole thing was a Tudor spectacle, complete with feasting, jousting, and probably more than a few awkward introductions. The pair were barely teenagers. Catherine was 15, and Arthur just 14. But hey, it was a different time. Who needs a driver's license when you've got a crown? Their marriage, however, was about as brief as it was legendary. Just 5 months after tying the knot, Arthur fell ill and died in April 1502. The exact cause is still debated, with contenders like the sweating sickness or tuberculosis making the rounds. Either way, Catherine was left a widow before she even got to figure out the English breakfast routine. Now, here's the juicy bit that history loves to chew on. Did they or didn't they? The big question was whether Catherine and Arthur had ever consummated their marriage. Why does this matter? Well, it turns out to be a major plot point in the saga of Henry Roman VIII, but let's not jump the gun. Catherine swore up and down that the marriage was never consummated, a claim that would become crucial later in her life. But in 1502, that was a question for future historians to ponder over endless cups of tea. In the meantime, Catherine's place in England was anything but secure. She was a young widow in a foreign land, and her dowry, a substantial sum of 200, ducats, was only half paid. Her father, Ferdinand, wasn't exactly rushing to send the rest of the cash, which left Catherine in a bit of an awkward position. With no husband and no full dowry payment, she was like a high-stakes chess piece without a board. Yet, Catherine wasn't one to sit around and mope. She was Ferdinand and Isabella's daughter, after all, which meant she had a knack for resilience. Her story was far from over, and the next chapter would see her caught in a web of intrigue, ambition, and royal drama that makes modern soap operas look like child's play. Stay tuned, because Catherine's adventures in England are just getting started. So here's Catherine of Aragon, stuck in England, feeling like the world's most sophisticated pawn in a never-ending game of Tudor chess. Her marriage to Arthur had been her golden ticket to influence and security, but now she was left holding a half-paid dowry and a widow's veil. Talk about a raw deal. Even worse, her father, Ferdinand of Aragon, was dragging his regal feet and coughing up the rest of the 200,000 ducats. It's like he was trying to pay his daughter's way into the English aristocracy with a layaway plan. In the meantime, Catherine was living in a state of royal purgatory. She was technically a princess, but without a husband or a clear role, her status was as murky as the River Thames. She was living in Durham House, not exactly Buckingham Palace, but still fancy enough. Yet her finances were stretched thinner than a Tudor waistline. Catherine had to pawn off her jewelry just to keep her household running. Imagine pawning your diamond tiara just to keep the lights on. Oh, wait, no electricity back then, but you get the drift. As if the financial woes weren't enough, Catherine was also caught in the middle of a diplomatic tug-of-war between England and Spain. Her father saw her as a bargaining chip in his relentless quest for European dominance. Ferdinand was like a medieval version of a hedge fund manager, always looking to maximize returns. England, on the other hand, had its own set of priorities. Henry Roman VII, the English king and father to the future Henry Roman VIII, was keen to keep Spain as an ally, but wasn't about to let Catherine leave without securing the full dowry. And then there was the matter of Prince Henry, Arthur's younger brother. The idea of betrothing Catherine to him was floated like a royal trial balloon. Henry Roman VII thought, why let a good princess go to waste? After all, Catherine was already in England, and marrying her to Henry would keep that sweet Spanish alliance intact. But there was a hitch, or rather, a papal one. Marrying your brother's widow was considered a big ecclesiastical no-no at the time, and so they needed a papal dispensation. Cue the Vatican's involvement, because nothing says romance like getting the Pope's permission. But don't think Catherine was just sitting around embroidering handkerchiefs while all this was happening. She was a woman of action, fluent in diplomacy as well as languages. She wrote letters to her father, advocating for her own future, and making it clear she wasn't content to be a mere political pawn. She was more like a chess queen, biding her time, waiting for the right moment to make her move. In 1505, Henry Roman VII and Ferdinand finally agreed on a new betrothal between Catherine and the new Prince Henry. They even got the papal dispensation lined up, no small feat considering the snail's pace of 16th century communications. But just as things were looking up, Henry Roman VII got cold feet. He suspended the engagement, citing the unpaid dowry as the issue. It was like the world's most awkward breakup, with Catherine left in the lurch yet again. Meanwhile, young Prince Henry was growing up, and boy, was he growing into something. Tall, athletic, and brimming with the kind of charisma that would make a modern-day celebrity blush. He was everything a Tudor prince was supposed to be. He was also, unfortunately for Catherine, a bit of a wild card. By the time he turned 18 in 1509, he was eager to step into the spotlight. And what better way to do that than by marrying a princess who was already conveniently residing in your country? Henry Roman VII's death in April 1509 was the catalyst for change. With the old king out of the picture, Henry Roman VIII ascended the throne and wasted no time in reigniting the plan to marry Catherine. After all, she was already here. She was well educated, and importantly, she was politically savvy. The alliance with Spain was still a plum prize, and the young king wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. So, on June 11, 1509, Henry married Catherine in a private ceremony. It was less of a grand affair than her first wedding, but it was the start of a new chapter. Catherine went from a pawn to a queen, quite literally. She was crowned alongside Henry in a lavish coronation at Westminster Abbey later that month. Finally, she had the position she had been groomed for all her life. The Tudor court was a stage, and she was ready to play her part. She was more than just a pretty face. She was a formidable political player with a keen understanding of the intricacies of European alliances. But as the history books would later show, her story was far from over. The drama, the intrigue, and the royal soap opera were just getting started. Stay tuned, because Catherine of Aragon's life is about to take more twists and turns than a Shakespearean tragedy, with plenty of courtly chaos to come. And so, our Spanish princess turned English queen found herself at the center of a royal whirlwind. The Tudor court was a heady mix of ambition, intrigue, and more drama than a reality TV reunion special. Catherine wasn't just a pretty face in this spectacle. She was a seasoned player, ready to take on the role of Queen of England like an Oscar contender gunning for a statuette. First on her royal to-do list was securing an heir. In the 16th century, producing a male successor was the monarch's equivalent of opening a successful tech startup. It was the ultimate proof of capability. But Catherine's path to motherhood was fraught with more challenges than a game of Tudor Monopoly. She experienced multiple pregnancies, but tragically, only one child survived infancy, Mary, born in 1516. The pressure to deliver a son was relentless, like a never-ending loop of a motivational seminar, and the stakes were as high as a Tudor coiffure. For Henry, the lack of a male heir was more than just a personal disappointment. It was a political quagmire. In an era where the word dynasty was as weighty as a gold-plated throne, a son was crucial to secure the Tudor legacy. Catherine, however, was undeterred. She was the daughter of Isabella, a queen who had led troops into battle. She wasn't about to let a few setbacks take her out of the game. She poured herself into her role as queen, supporting Henry while managing the court with all the finesse of a seasoned diplomat. Speaking of diplomacy, Catherine's political acumen was on full display during the Battle of Flodden in 1513. While Henry was off on one of his continental jaunts, trying to outshine his French rivals, Catherine was left to hold down the fort in England. When the Scots, led by King James Roman IV, decided to take advantage of Henry's absence by invading, Catherine sprang into action. Wearing a suit of armor, she rallied troops to defend her adopted homeland. Picture this, a queen in armor, drumming up support like a medieval Joan of Arc, minus the pyrotechnics. Her efforts paid off. The English forces under the Earl of Surrey delivered a resounding defeat to the Scots at Flodden, and James Roman IV was killed in battle. Catherine, ever the savvy communicator, sent Henry a piece of James's bloodied cloak as a trophy, with a letter that probably read something like, "While you were out, I handled it." This victory was more than just a military win. It was a PR coup. Catherine's leadership solidified her status as a formidable queen, earning her a place in the annals of history as not just a consort, but a ruler in her own right. Now, let's talk about Henry and Catherine as a power couple. In the early years, they were the 16th century's answer to Beyoncé and Jay-Z. Young, influential, and seemingly unstoppable. They shared a love of art, music, and sport, often engaging in tournaments and festivities that made the Tudor court the place to be. Catherine's influence extended beyond the battlefield and into Henry's policies. She often acted as regent in his absence, and her counsel was valued by a king who, despite his later reputation, started his reign as a learned and affable monarch. But like any celebrity duo, the pressures of life in the spotlight began to take their toll. As the years rolled on, the lack of a male heir loomed like a dark cloud over their union. Henry's gaze started to wander, and with it, the stability of their marriage. Yet, Catherine remained steadfast, balancing her duties as queen with her personal struggles. She was a rock amid the tumult, embodying the stoic resilience that would become her hallmark. Catherine's contributions to England weren't limited to her military and political exploits. She was a patron of education and the arts, championing humanist scholars and supporting the translation of religious texts. Her influence on the cultural landscape of England was significant, and she played a key role in fostering the intellectual environment that would later give rise to the English Renaissance. However, the mythic romance of Catherine and Henry's early marriage was slowly giving way to the harsh realities of dynastic politics. Henry's desperation for a son became a driving force in the court, overshadowing the many achievements they had shared. The allure of youth and promise was being replaced by the stark demands of succession, and the Queen found herself increasingly isolated in her own court. Despite these challenges, Catherine's legacy was far from diminished. Her strength, intelligence, and unwavering dedication to her role set a standard for queenship that would be hard to match. While the world around her shifted like the tides, she remained a beacon of stability, her story woven into the fabric of English history. But as her tale unfolded, new players would enter the stage, and the drama of the Tudor dynasty was far from over. Stay tuned for the next act, where the plot thickens and the stakes grow higher than ever. And so, as the Tudor drama unfolded, Catherine of Aragon found herself embroiled in a royal crisis that makes most soap opera plotlines look like child's play. And to the great matter, a euphemistic term for Henry Roman VIII's increasingly desperate quest to ditch Catherine in favor of a new wife who might finally deliver the golden ticket, a male heir. This wasn't just a matter of marital dissatisfaction. It was a dynastic necessity with political ramifications as explosive as a barrel of gunpowder left too close to the fire. Now, let's debunk one of the juiciest myths, the idea that Henry was head over heels, starry-eyed in love with Anne Boleyn. Sure, Anne was captivating, and she had that whole mysterious lady-in-waiting vibe going for her, but let's not kid ourselves. Henry's pursuit of Anne was less about romance and more about the harsh realities of Tudor succession. You see, Anne was a means to an end, a chance at the elusive male heir that Catherine had failed to provide despite multiple pregnancies and heart-wrenching losses. The stakes were high. No male heir meant instability, and in Tudor England, instability was about as welcome as a rat at a royal banquet. Henry's obsession with securing the future of the Tudor line was fueled by nightmares of civil war and rebellion, shadows of the Wars of the Roses still haunting the corridors of power. With Catherine unable to fulfill this critical role, Henry's eye wandered to Anne. She was young, vivacious, and crucially, had no history of failed male births. But love triangles are never simple, especially when they involve a king, a queen, and a potential queen-to-be. Henry's pursuit of an annulment from Catherine wasn't just a personal affair. It was a full-blown international incident. The Pope, Clement Roman VII, was caught between a rock and a hard place. Granting an annulment would anger the powerful Spanish Empire, ruled by Catherine's nephew, Charles V. And Charles wasn't the kind of ruler you wanted on your bad side. Think of him as the 16th century equivalent of a geopolitical heavyweight. Henry, though, was not a man to be thwarted by papal indecision. Enter Thomas Wolsey, Henry's right-hand man and the man with the plan, or so Henry hoped. Wolsey was tasked with maneuvering the labyrinthine corridors of Vatican politics to secure the annulment. But no amount of diplomatic finesse could sway Clement, who was more concerned with keeping Charles V happy than Henry Roman VIII satisfied. So, the Pope played a diplomatic waiting game, and Wolsey found himself in a bind, caught between his king's escalating impatience and the Pope's immovable stance. With Wolsey's failure, Henry's frustration reached a boiling point. The king began exploring more radical solutions, leading to the seismic shifts in religious and political landscapes that would define his reign. Enter Thomas Cromwell, a man whose cunning and ambition were matched only by his ruthlessness. Cromwell saw an opportunity to reshape England's religious landscape and Henry's marital status in one fell swoop. His solution: break away from the Catholic Church entirely and establish Henry as the supreme head of the Church in England. Talk about thinking outside the papal box. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a revolution, a religious upheaval that would ripple across Europe. The Reformation in England was less about theological disputes and more about Henry's personal vendetta against papal authority. It was the ultimate power grab, and boy, did it shake things up. By 1533, Henry had married Anne Boleyn, and the break with Rome was all but complete. Catherine, meanwhile, was unceremoniously demoted from Queen to Dowager Princess of Wales, a title that stung like a thorn in her side. Catherine wasn't the type to go quietly. Her refusal to accept the annulment wasn't just stubbornness. It was a testament to her unwavering belief in the sanctity of her marriage and her role as Henry's lawful wife. Her defiance became a symbol of resistance, earning her a place in the hearts of many English subjects who saw her as the true queen. Catherine's stand against the annulment was as much about her personal dignity as it was about religious conviction. She was, after all, a woman of deep faith, molded by the Catholic monarchs of Spain. While Henry's new marriage to Anne seemed like a fresh start, it was anything but a fairy tale ending. The political and religious upheaval Catherine's refusal triggered was immense. The Act of Supremacy in 1534 cemented Henry's authority over the Church of England, severing centuries-old ties with the Vatican. This wasn't just a change in marital status. It was a seismic shift that would redefine England's religious landscape, leading to decades of conflict and confusion. But let's not forget the economic angle, because when kings play chess, everyone else pays the price. The dissolution of the monasteries that followed the break with Rome was less about religious reform and more about filling the royal coffers. The monasteries were wealthy institutions, sitting on prime real estate and treasure troves of gold and silver. Henry's decision to dissolve them was a masterstroke of financial opportunism, transferring vast wealth from the church to the crown and reshaping England's economic landscape in the process. Catherine's downfall, then, was a catalyst for change on a grand scale. Her refusal to acquiesce to Henry's demands wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a flashpoint in the broader narrative of the Tudor dynasty. As the first queen to challenge a king's authority so publicly, Catherine set a precedent that would echo through history, influencing the lives of queens and commoners alike. The story of Catherine, Henry, and Anne is often romanticized, but the reality is far more complex. It was a tale of power, ambition, and the harsh realities of royal life, where personal desires and political necessities collided in dramatic fashion. Catherine's legacy, though overshadowed by the more sensational aspects of Henry's reign, remains a testament to her strength and resilience. Her story is far from over, and as the Tudor saga continues, more twists and turns await. Stay tuned, because the courtly chaos is just heating up. So, here we are, diving into the last act of Catherine of Aragon's drama-packed life, her final years, where the stakes were as high as a Tudor royal banquet bill. After being demoted to Dowager Princess of Wales, Catherine was effectively exiled from court. Henry might have been the king, but Catherine was the queen of unyielding resilience. Even in isolation, she refused to go quietly into the night. Her removal from court wasn't just a personal blow. It was a carefully calculated political move by Henry, designed to weaken her influence and keep her supporters at bay. But if Henry thought Catherine would fade into obscurity like a forgotten footnote, he was in for a royal surprise. The English people had a soft spot for Catherine, and it wasn't just because she was the underdog in a royal soap opera. Her charity work and genuine concern for her subjects had earned her a place in their hearts. While Anne Boleyn struggled to win over the populace, Catherine's popularity was as enduring as the English reign. Her supporters saw her as the rightful queen, a beacon of stability amid the chaos of Henry's personal and political machinations. It's like she was the people's choice in a medieval reality show, and the votes were overwhelmingly in her favor. Her daughter, Mary, was another key player in this drama. Catherine's unwavering insistence on Mary's legitimacy as Henry's heir was a crucial part of her resistance. Despite the king's efforts to declare Mary illegitimate, Catherine stood firm. She wrote letters and lobbied tirelessly for her daughter, all while maintaining her own dignity. Talk about a masterclass in maternal tenacity. She was like a queen bee defending her hive, refusing to let her line be extinguished without a fight. As the months turned into years, Catherine's health began to decline. She was moved from one drafty castle to another, each one a downgrade from her previous residences. The economic cost of maintaining her was something Henry was all too aware of, and it's likely he hoped that making her life as uncomfortable as possible might push her towards submission. But Catherine was cut from the same cloth as her mother, Queen Isabella. She wasn't about to capitulate, even if it meant living in relative poverty compared to her former life of splendor. Catherine's final years were spent at Kimbolton Castle, far removed from the bustling court life. She once navigated with the finesse of a seasoned politician, but even from this remote location, her influence was felt. Her correspondence with Mary was a lifeline, both emotionally and politically. Catherine's letters are a testament to her wit, intelligence, and unbreakable spirit. filled with advice and encouragement for the daughter she hoped would one day reclaim her rightful place. In January 1536, Catherine fell gravely ill. Despite her condition, she remained mentally sharp, her correspondence still reflecting the keen political mind that had once charmed and challenged the Tudor court. On January 7th, Catherine passed away, her final words reportedly a message of forgiveness to Henry. Her death marked the end of an era, but her legacy was just beginning to take root. Catherine's legacy isn't just in the history books, it's in the very fabric of English history. Her story is a cautionary tale of power, politics, and the personal cost of dynastic ambition. In a world where royal marriages were strategic alliances rather than love matches, Catherine's life underscores the harsh realities faced by women in positions of power. Her resilience and dignity in the face of adversity have made her a historical icon, admired for her strength and grace under pressure. Comparisons to modern-day royal soap operas are inevitable. Picture Catherine as the unsinkable matriarch in a long-running series, her trials and tribulations playing out against a backdrop of shifting alliances and political intrigue. Her story has all the elements of a blockbuster: love, betrayal, power struggles, and the indomitable human spirit. It's the kind of narrative that would have today's streaming platforms clamoring for adaptation rights. But beyond the drama, Catherine of Aragon's life offers profound insights into the nature of power and legacy. She was a woman who refused to be defined by the men around her, carving out her own place in history through sheer force of will. Her steadfast devotion to her daughter and her refusal to compromise her principles in the face of overwhelming odds are lessons in resilience that resonate even today. As we wrap up this historical deep dive, it's worth remembering that Catherine's story is not just a relic of the past. It's a reminder of the enduring complexities of human relationships and the relentless pursuit of power. Her life and legacy challenge us to look beyond the romanticized versions of history, urging us to confront the raw, unvarnished truths that lie beneath the surface. So, as you tuck yourself in with this newfound knowledge, ponder the legacy of a queen who was more than just a footnote in Henry Roman VIII's tumultuous reign. Catherine of Aragon was a force of nature, her story as compelling today as it was centuries ago. And in the grand tapestry of history, her thread remains vibrant, a testament to the enduring power of resilience and the human spirit.